Amidst the luxury of the charity event, the humble waitress barely has time to react when her son runs between the guests and, to everyone's shock, clings to the powerful CEO, calling him Daddy. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. On a crisp autumn evening, lights sparkled against the glass walls of the Silvercrest Country Club. The well-heeled crowd, dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits, filed into the ballroom for the annual Hope and Hearts charity gala. At first glance, it seemed like an event reserved for the city's elite, CEOs, philanthropists, and socialites. But amidst the swirl of champagne flutes and polite laughter, no one noticed the humble waitress standing by the buffet table, adjusting her uniform nervously. Her name was Linda Thompson. She wasn't a high-profile guest that night. She was only there because the restaurant she worked for had been contracted to serve the gala. As a single mother who lived paycheck to paycheck, Linda never imagined she'd end up in a place like this. The chandeliers, the live string quartet, the endless array of sparkling jewelry. It felt like a world so distant from the one she inhabited. Yet Linda had no choice but to bring her 7-year-old son, Ethan, along with her. She couldn't afford a babysitter, and her boss, sympathetic for once, allowed Ethan to stay in the staff lounge as long as he stayed out of trouble. "He'll be fine," her boss had said, waving off Linda's concerns. "Just make sure he doesn't wander into the ballroom." But life has a funny way of unraveling when you need it to stay neatly tied. After 2 hours on her feet, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres and politely smiling at guests who barely acknowledged her presence, Linda realized Ethan was no longer in the lounge. He'd gone missing in a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. In a panic, she left the staff area and began searching frantically among the swirling crowd, whispering her son's name under the hum of orchestral music. As she slipped between clusters of guests, Linda's heart pounded. Where could Ethan be? Had someone taken him? Or maybe he'd just gotten lost. To her mounting distress, the grand stage at the far end of the ballroom had started to quiet the audience. Apparently, some important figure was about to speak. Dread tightened in Linda's chest. She felt time was running out. She couldn't risk being caught on the main floor, but she couldn't abandon her son either. Just then, a hush spread through the crowd. Standing behind the gilded podium was none other than Charles Caldwell, the CEO of Caldwell Industries, and a man known for donating colossal sums to charity. He was tall, with an imposing presence, a clean-shaven face, and streaks of silver hair that indicated both wisdom and wealth. The hush turned into an admiring murmur. Everyone wanted to be near him, or at least in his line of sight. As Caldwell began his speech about community outreach, Linda slipped behind a marble column, trying to remain unseen. She scanned the room again, tears threatening to blur her vision. The thought of losing Ethan in this crush of strangers was overwhelming. Her mind spiraled with worry. He's just a little boy. He must be so scared. She took a deep breath to steady herself and tried to concentrate on the corners of the room, the spaces behind the decorative pillars, anywhere a child might hide. Then she heard it, a shrill exclamation that made the entire crowd fall silent. A small voice pierced the hush, echoing through the ornate hall. "Dad! Daddy!" Before she could react, Linda saw Ethan pushing his way to the front of the stage. He wasn't crying. He wasn't scared. Instead, he ran across the polished floor, heading straight for Charles Caldwell, who stood there as stunned as everyone else. The audience collectively held its breath. It was as though time had stopped, leaving only the boy's echoing cry ringing through the hush. Linda's heart hammered against her ribcage. How on earth did Ethan recognize Charles Caldwell? It wasn't possible, was it? She struggled to process what she was seeing. Ethan was clinging to the CEO's leg, looking up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. Almost simultaneously, murmurs began to ripple across the room. Guests craned their necks. The paparazzi, invited to capture the generosity of the city's wealthiest, hurried forward to snap a flurry of photos. 1,000 questions flooded Linda's mind. Why was Ethan calling Caldwell Daddy? Could it be a simple mix-up, or was there something else? Something Linda had spent years forcing herself not to wonder about. She'd never told Ethan much about his father. She had always said he was gone, and left it at that. It was a wound she hid from everyone, including her own son. She felt dizzy, as though the glittering chandeliers overhead were spinning. As for Charles Caldwell, the shock on his face was unmistakable. He took a step back, but not aggressively. Rather, he looked intrigued and undeniably rattled. His microphone thumped against the podium, sending a low hum through the speakers. The crowd waited, tension thick as the swirl of summer heat outside. Women in elegant gowns exchanged baffled glances. Men in tailored suits raised their eyebrows, trying to decipher the spectacle. Ethan tugged on Caldwell's trouser leg again, tears forming in his innocent brown eyes. "Dad, I knew I'd find you," he said, his little voice trembling with a combination of excitement and relief. "Please don't go away again." Linda pushed through the throng, ignoring the gasps and stares. She didn't care about the job, the guests, or the humiliating scene. All she cared about was protecting Ethan. But how could she protect him from this? She felt the weight of all the onlookers, their curiosity morphing into gossip, their pity turning into speculation. As Linda reached the stage, security guards stepped forward, unsure whether to remove Ethan or help him. Caldwell held up a single hand to halt them. His gaze rested on Linda, eyes brimming with unspoken questions. She froze for an instant, locking eyes with the man who was rumored to be ruthless in business and unstoppable in pursuit of success. For a fleeting second, Linda found herself lost in the swirl of memories that she had kept locked away for years. The heartbreak, the regrets, and the secrets she'd buried to protect her child all rushed to the surface. Could Charles Caldwell truly be the father Ethan never knew? Just as Linda was about to speak, the event's organizer approached the podium, nervously tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice quivering, "let's all remain calm. We've had a little family reunion, it seems. Let's give Mr. Caldwell and these guests some space, please." Members of the crowd stared at Linda with unabashed curiosity. Others took pictures, while some whispered in each other's ears. A high society couple in the front row actually looked sympathetic. The hush in the room turned almost deafening as Linda finally found her voice. "Ethan, come here, honey." But Ethan wouldn't move. Instead, he lifted his face to Caldwell, brimming with a childlike sincerity that cut through the swirling tension. "You left us, but Mom said maybe you had a reason." Linda's eyes stung with tears. She wanted to correct Ethan, wanted to gather him in her arms and run from this entire scene. But her legs were rooted in place, and her mind churned with unanswered questions. Before she could even begin to rationalize what was happening, Caldwell gently reached out, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. I don't—" Caldwell stuttered, turning to Linda, searching her face as if seeking confirmation. The guests leaned forward, their collective curiosity mounting by the second. Journalists hovered at the edges of the ballroom, cameras at the ready, waiting to capture any confession or dramatic revelation. And Linda realized then, in that breathless moment, that there might be no going back. Whatever Caldwell was about to say, or do, would change her and Ethan's lives forever. Silence lingered in the ballroom like a storm cloud ready to burst. Charles Caldwell stood rooted behind the ornate podium, his normally composed demeanor shattered by the small boy at his side. 1,000 thoughts clashed behind his calm gray eyes, and for the first time in his public life, he seemed lost for words. Linda watched him gather his composure piece by piece in front of the entire charity gala. She wanted to rush forward and pull Ethan away, whisk him home so they could pretend this moment had never happened, but something in her refused to move. Perhaps it was the weight of 7 years of secrets that pinned her feet to the polished floor, or maybe it was the part of her that needed the truth as desperately as Ethan did. Her thoughts spun. She remembered the day she'd discovered she was pregnant, the panic, the tears, the frantic calls to a man whose phone was perpetually switched off. Months later, she decided to raise her child alone. She'd never spoken Caldwell's name again, not even when Ethan asked her where his father was. Instead, she always offered generic answers. He's away, or he left before you were born. Over time, Linda willed those memories into a locked vault in her mind, determined to protect her son from the heartbreak she'd experienced. But here they stood. No more vault. No more secrets. The swirl of taffeta and tuxedos closed in around them, and Linda felt the combined eyes of 100 onlookers. She wiped a stray tear from her cheek, her breathing shallow. Up at the podium, Caldwell gently leaned down so he was at Ethan's eye level. "What's your name, buddy?" he asked, his voice surprisingly soft. Ethan sniffled, still clinging to Caldwell's tailored pant leg. "Ethan," he replied. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment like hungry vultures. Linda could practically feel the headline forming in real time. Reclusive billionaire claimed as father by waitress's child. She braced herself, knowing how merciless the gossip columns could be. Then Caldwell's gaze shifted from Ethan to Linda. His expression flickered between shock, confusion, and a trace of something Linda dared not name. Regret, perhaps. "Linda," he said softly, "can we talk?" The event organizer, a fidgety man named Ted, hovered to the side, tapping the microphone again. His professional grin faltered, but he attempted to bring the crowd back under control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we'd like to continue our program in just a moment. If everyone would kindly take a seat." A slow rustle moved through the audience. The hush was replaced by a low buzz of murmured speculation. Linda heard snatches of conversation. "Could this be for publicity? I always wondered why Caldwell never married. What a scandal!" Her boss, a stocky, balding man, rushed over wide-eyed. "Linda, what on earth?" But Linda hardly registered his words. She was locked in a stare with Caldwell, who gently placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Let's find somewhere private," he suggested. His tone was gentle but laced with urgency. He wanted out of this scene just as much as Linda did. She nodded numbly. With careful steps, she took Ethan's hand in hers, and the three of them slipped out a side door into a quiet hallway. The hallway, though elaborately decorated with framed portraits of past benefactors, felt colder, more isolated. They were a mere 20 feet from the hubbub of the ballroom, but the stillness was jarring. Away from prying eyes, Linda found her courage, enough to kneel down and examine Ethan for any sign of distress. "Are you okay, baby?" she asked, searching his face. Ethan nodded. "Yes, Mom. But why did he leave us? Why didn't he ever come back?" The question made Linda's chest tighten. Before she could respond, Caldwell cleared his throat. "Ethan, I didn't know you existed. If I had known—" His voice trailed off, the final words hanging unspoken. Linda straightened and turned to face him. Her anger sparked. "What do you mean you didn't know? I called your office so many times, Charles. I left messages that were never returned." She hadn't planned on speaking so bluntly, but the swirl of adrenaline and maternal protectiveness took control of her tongue. Caldwell's eyes flickered with pain. "Messages? Linda, I never received a single one. My staff handles the calls. Even personal lines are often screened." He stopped himself, sensing how inadequate it sounded. Yet Linda could tell from his expression that he wasn't lying. Not about that, at least. She blew out a shaky breath. Old bitterness, the kind she'd buried under years of working double shifts, began to bubble to the surface. She remembered leaving voicemails, letters, anything she could think of, until she finally gave up. She realized with a pang that maybe Caldwell hadn't heartlessly ignored her pleas. Maybe they'd just never reached him at all. That possibility was almost harder to bear than her earlier assumptions. "And you," Caldwell murmured, looking into her eyes. "You never tried to find another way to tell me?" Linda tensed. I was done trying after I got no response. Another wave of anger threatened to break through. I couldn't chase a fantasy, not when I was about to become a mother. Caldwell drew in a breath, glancing down at Ethan, who was rubbing his eyes in confusion. Then Caldwell turned to Linda with the gentle resolve of someone who'd spent his entire adult life negotiating deals worth billions. "Let's not do this here," he said. "We can't keep him in a hallway like this with paparazzi about to burst in any minute." He paused. "Let me take you both somewhere quiet. We need time to talk. I promise, no more secrets." Linda felt the hallway stretch and contract around her. The idea of leaving with Charles Caldwell, the man who might very well be the father of her child, set every nerve on edge. She didn't trust him entirely. Not yet. But her mind raced with the thought of returning to the glaring lights of the ballroom, where her personal life would be devoured by scandal-hungry cameras. She looked down at Ethan. His little face, so hopeful and so afraid, tore at her heart. "Okay," she murmured. "We can talk somewhere else. But just talk." Caldwell nodded. "Of course. Give me just a moment." Before Linda could ask what he meant, Caldwell stepped back into the ballroom. The music had resumed, someone attempting to salvage the evening's agenda, but the hum of gossip still lingered in the corners. She peeked through the door, watching him exchange quick words with the event organizer. Ted nodded in forced politeness, then tried to calm the audience once more. Charles Caldwell was a pro at maintaining a respectable front, but Linda could tell he was reeling inside. In less than a minute, he returned to the hallway. "My driver's bringing the car around." He turned to Linda and Ethan, forcing a small, almost shy smile, an expression that felt foreign on a man so powerful. "Ready?" Linda swallowed hard, squared her shoulders, and tightened her grip on Ethan's hand. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's go." She silently followed Caldwell through a maze of service corridors, out past a staff parking area, and toward a long, sleek black sedan idling under a dim street lamp. As he opened the passenger door, Linda scooped Ethan into the back seat, sliding in after him. The interior was plush, dark leather seats, tinted windows, the faintest hint of cedar cologne. It smelled like a life Linda had long ago decided she'd never be part of. The car pulled away from the glowing facade of the country club. Inside, a swirl of tension settled in. Linda's mind whirred with questions. Where were they heading? Would Caldwell actually explain himself? And how on earth had Ethan guessed that this powerful stranger was his father? Looking out the window, Linda realized the city lights were now rushing past, giving way to quieter, tree-lined roads. She turned to Caldwell, who sat in contemplative silence. "We're going to my home," he said softly, as though reading her thoughts. "No cameras, no onlookers. After we talk, I'll drive you back wherever you want, if that's what you choose." Linda felt a sudden pang in her chest. She wondered if she'd just stepped onto a path that had no turning back. She glanced at Ethan, whose eyes had grown heavy after the night's excitement. He laid his head on her lap, trusting, as if all was finally right in his world. She only hoped they could find the answers that would keep that trust intact. The car wound through a quiet neighborhood of stately tree-lined streets. Beyond the tinted windows, Linda noticed elegant lampposts, manicured hedges, and gated properties that seemed to stretch for acres. She kept her hand on Ethan's back as he dozed, her gaze locked on Charles Caldwell, who stared pensively at the glowing dashboard. His driver, whom Caldwell had introduced only as Mark, maintained a respectful silence, occasionally glancing into the rearview mirror to check on his passengers. Linda had never envisioned a scene like this. She was still in her waitress uniform, after all. The faint smell of fried appetizers and spilled champagne clung to her clothes. Meanwhile, Caldwell's suit was immaculate, the cufflinks glinting whenever the streetlights caught them. The two of them couldn't have come from more different worlds. After what felt like a long, tense ride, Mark turned onto a private drive framed by towering oak trees. The branches overhead intertwined, creating a tunnel effect. Linda felt her stomach clench. This place was far more opulent than anything she had imagined. It wasn't just a house. It was practically an estate, complete with a wide, circular driveway and a fountain burbling in the center. On a normal day, Linda might have marveled at the finely sculpted hedges and the grand columns at the front entrance. Tonight, her thoughts were too consumed by uncertainty and fear to appreciate the view. The car came to a smooth halt before the steps leading to the main door. Caldwell took a moment, inhaled deeply as though steeling himself, and then reached for the door handle. "We'll be inside," he murmured to Mark, who nodded and pulled the car around to a side garage. Linda carefully lifted Ethan, cradling his head against her shoulder. He stirred but didn't fully wake, just mumbled something that sounded like "Mommy." Caldwell offered to help, extending an arm toward Ethan's small frame. She tensed instinctively, but after a brief hesitation, she let him bear some of their son's weight. Together, they climbed the front steps. The door opened from within before they even had a chance to knock. A woman, perhaps in her early 60s, with short gray hair and a crisp navy blazer, stood in the threshold. Her professional demeanor suggested she was on Caldwell's staff, possibly the house manager. She didn't even blink at the sight of Linda's disheveled uniform or the sleeping child. Clearly, she was well practiced at concealing surprise. "Good evening, Mr. Caldwell," the woman said politely, stepping aside. "Shall I prepare the guest suite?" "Please do, Barbara," Caldwell replied, his voice low. "And could you bring some warm milk upstairs? I'm not sure if he'll wake up or not, but just in case." The request sounded awkward, as though Caldwell had never once uttered those words in his life. Barbara nodded in acknowledgement, her gaze briefly landing on Linda with gentle curiosity before she disappeared down a hallway. Linda shifted, adjusting Ethan's weight on her hip. "Is it okay if I just put him to bed right away? This night has been a lot for him." "Of course," Caldwell said, quietly ushering her across polished marble floors and up a winding staircase. As they climbed higher, Linda caught glimpses of high ceilings, ornate light fixtures, and paintings that looked museum-worthy. Each step reinforced the vast gulf between their lives. Upstairs, Caldwell led her to a cozy guest room. Despite the home's overall grandeur, the suite itself felt more intimate, almost like a retreat. A large window overlooked the moonlit garden. Thick curtains embroidered in subtle patterns framed the view. The bed stood in the middle, piled with plush pillows. At once, Linda felt a pang of regret for having brought Ethan to such a public spectacle. He was the one paying for the adults' decisions and oversights. Linda softly lowered Ethan onto the mattress. She removed his shoes and gently covered him with the nearest blanket. He stirred briefly, blinking at the lamp's warm glow, then sank back into sleep. She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead, a wave of motherly protectiveness surging through her. Caldwell stood by the doorway, silent. In the soft light, Linda noticed subtle signs of turmoil beneath his businesslike facade, the hint of sadness in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. It dawned on her that he was seeing his child sleep for what might be the very first time. She followed him out into the hallway, carefully closing the door behind her so that only a sliver of light filtered into Ethan's room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hush of the estate surrounded them, broken only by the faint sound of air conditioning humming through vents. "Thank you," Linda said, crossing her arms. She couldn't bring herself to meet Caldwell's gaze for long. He needed a safe place to rest. Caldwell hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for the spectacle tonight, and for everything that led to it." His apology struck her like a jolt. She'd expected a million things from him, denial, anger, or even arrogance, but sincerity wasn't high on that list. She felt her own walls rising, a reflex born of years spent protecting Ethan and herself. She cleared her throat, fidgeting with the hem of her uniform. "I still don't understand how Ethan recognized you so easily." I've never shown him any pictures. I've barely spoken about you at all." Caldwell's brow furrowed. I wish I had an answer. Perhaps he saw a photo of me somewhere. My face is in the news often enough. Or maybe he overheard something at the gala. Linda mulled it over. It was possible that in the swirl of fancy dresses and chatter, someone mentioned Caldwell as the big donor. Children pick up on fragments of conversations better than adults realize. Maybe Ethan's instincts just kicked in. Still, the moment replayed in her mind. Ethan running straight to Caldwell, calling him Daddy with such conviction. Something about it felt bigger than an overheard rumor. Before Linda could dwell any further, Barbara appeared at the end of the hall carrying a tray with a small pitcher of milk, a teacup, and a glass of water. The woman walked quietly, offering a soft smile as she approached. "I'll leave the tray here, Mr. Caldwell. Let me know if you need anything else." "Thank you, Barbara," he replied. She placed the tray on a small accent table in the corridor and disappeared again, as silent and unobtrusive as a ghost. For a moment, Linda was intensely aware of Caldwell's presence. They were alone together for the first time in years. So many questions rattled in her head that she didn't know where to start. She decided to speak the simplest truth. "I never meant for Ethan to find out like this." Caldwell nodded, exhaling slowly. "Nor did I. Tonight was supposed to be about raising funds for a new children's hospital wing." He grimaced at the irony. "But Linda, if I'd known, if there was a chance you were pregnant with my child—" "I tried," she countered, her voice sharper than intended. "I tried to tell you. I called. I wrote letters. Eventually I told myself you just didn't want to be found." His gaze flickered to the polished floor. He appeared genuinely stricken. "There's so much you don't know about my life. How my staff controls information. How my father's old attorneys used to handle potential paternity rumors. But I get that none of that excuses the feeling that I abandoned you." Hearing him mention an entire apparatus designed to ward off lawsuits or claims made Linda realize how small and powerless she would have seemed in that world. She softened slightly, though her anger still simmered. "Why would your employees hide something like this from you? You don't exactly strike me as the type of man who'd want his child to vanish." Caldwell shook his head, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. To them, it might have been a liability. The Caldwell brand is carefully managed. Any whisper of scandal, they clamp down on it. For all I know, they saw your messages and treated them like a threat. His jaw tightened. "I swear to you, Linda, if I'd known, I would have at least faced the situation head-on." She studied him for a long moment, trying to determine if he was being genuine. A swirl of emotions churned: hurt, betrayal, anger, confusion, and beneath it all, a spark of longing to believe him. Because if Caldwell was telling the truth, then everything she thought she knew had been built on a misunderstanding. Or maybe it was simply a collision of his high-powered life and her day-to-day struggles. Finally, Linda sighed, leaning her back against the wall. "We can't solve 7 years of issues in a single night, but we need some sort of plan, for Ethan's sake." Caldwell nodded, relief touching his features. "I want to be part of his life, Linda. I need to do right by him, and by you." His tone was earnest, almost pleading. "I'm willing to start however you'll allow." This was the crossroads. Linda felt it like a tangible weight pressing on her chest. She could shut Caldwell out, keep raising Ethan on her own, and vanish from his sphere as quickly as she'd entered. Or she could attempt to navigate a relationship with this powerful man who claimed he'd never known about his son. She took a moment, forcing herself to think carefully. "You can start," she said slowly, "by showing me you're serious. I don't want promises. I want to see real action. And Ethan deserves an explanation, one that he can understand." Caldwell looked determined. "I can do that. Let me prove it. Tomorrow morning, let's figure out the next steps. I'll have my attorneys draw something up to ensure I'm accountable, and then we'll tell Ethan what we can, in a way that won't scare or confuse him more than he already is." "All right," Linda managed, feeling something loosen in her chest. "We'll see." Silence fell between them again, but it was a different kind of silence, filled with the weight of possibilities rather than just raw tension. From behind the guest room door, Linda heard Ethan give a soft murmur in his sleep. She moved to check on her son, placing a hand on the doorknob. "I need to be with him tonight," she said, glancing back at Caldwell. "He'll panic if he wakes up alone in a strange place." "Of course," Caldwell replied, stepping aside. "I'll have Barbara set up some blankets for you, too. Take the bed if you want. There are more guest rooms, but if you'd rather stay close to Ethan, I understand." She nodded, stepping into the softly lit room. Something in her chest fluttered, an echo of gratitude, and maybe the faintest flicker of hope. She had never expected to find herself here, but now that she was, she realized the old image of Caldwell that she carried in her head might not match the complicated reality. Her last glimpse before shutting the door was of Charles Caldwell in the hallway, shoulders drooping with exhaustion, but eyes alight with cautious determination. And, for the first time in 7 years, Linda Thompson allowed herself to consider a future where Ethan had a father, and she was not solely carrying the weight of everything on her shoulders. Morning light filtered through the heavy drapes, creating golden stripes across the guest room floor. Linda blinked awake to find Ethan curled up under her arm, still fast asleep. For a moment she forgot where she was. The plush duvet, the antique side table, the faint hum of central air. It all felt foreign. Then the events of the previous night crashed back into her awareness. She was in Charles Caldwell's home. Warily she eased out of bed, trying not to wake Ethan. Her feet sank into the soft rug and she glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was just past 7. The house felt unnaturally still, as though the usual staff or occupants walked on tiptoe to avoid disturbing guests. Linda lightly pressed her ear to the door, hearing nothing. The tension in her shoulders eased a fraction. With careful steps, she headed to the connecting bathroom to freshen up. Her reflection startled her, hair tousled, makeup smudged, uniform wrinkled from sleeping in it. She splashed water on her face and ran her fingers through her hair. It didn't help much, but at least she felt more awake. She debated whether to go search for Charles. Part of her wanted to slip out with Ethan, call a cab, vanish before the day's awkwardness began. Yet a larger part realized it was pointless to run. The truth was out. For Ethan's sake, she needed to hear Caldwell's plan. Ethan stirred just as she stepped back into the room. He sat up, blinking in the soft morning light. "Mom, where are we?" he asked, rubbing his eyes in confusion. Linda knelt beside him, smoothing the blanket. "We're at a friend's house, honey. Remember last night? We left the gala. You fell asleep on the ride here." He frowned as though trying to piece together fragments of a dream. "I remember you and me leaving the big building, but the rest is fuzzy." Then alarm flickered in his gaze. "Where's the man from last night, the one I called Dad?" Linda swallowed. She placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, feeling both the weight of his curiosity and her own uncertainty. "He's here, in the house somewhere. We'll see him soon." Ethan pressed his lips together. "Am I in trouble?" She pulled him into a hug, heart aching. "No, baby. You're not in trouble. It's just complicated. Let's get you cleaned up, and then maybe we can figure out breakfast. We'll talk to him after that." He nodded timidly. Linda could sense the questions swirling in his mind. But he remained quiet, trusting her to guide him. She led him to the bathroom, helping him wash his face and hands. She wished she had a change of clothes for him. Sleeping in his little suit had wrinkled it beyond recognition. She silently cursed herself for not preparing better. Then again, how could she have known? Soon, Linda heard faint footsteps in the corridor. A soft knock at the guest room door made both mother and son pause. Linda opened it warily, half expecting to see Charles standing there. Instead, Barbara, the efficient house manager, offered a gentle smile. "Good morning," Barbara said, holding a small package. "I went out first thing and picked up some fresh clothes for Ethan. They might be a bit big, but I did my best with the sizes you mentioned last night." Warmth and relief flooded Linda's chest. She hadn't realized Barbara had even asked her those details. She must have done it discreetly at some point while Linda was settling Ethan. It felt awkward to accept charity, but her son needed clean clothing, and at least this act of kindness was free from an agenda. "Thank you," Linda managed, feeling genuine gratitude. "That's so thoughtful of you." Barbara dipped her head. "There's also breakfast downstairs. Mr. Caldwell is waiting in the sunroom whenever you're ready." Anxiety flared. Linda bit her lip. "All right, we'll be down soon." Barbara vanished into the hallway, footsteps fading down the stairs. Linda closed the door, pressing the neat new outfit against her chest. Ethan peered up at her, curiosity returning to his features. "Is that from Dad?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "It's from someone who works here," she replied. "But it's nice, right? You can change out of that rumpled suit." He wrinkled his nose. "I guess so." Then, as if remembering something important, Ethan added, "Mom, last night at the party, people were staring at us, and I remember calling the man Dad. I don't know why, but I just felt like he was." Linda's heart tightened. How could she explain the messy adult complexities without overwhelming him? She took a breath. "Sometimes kids have feelings about grown-ups. Maybe you recognized him from TV or something. He's a famous man, Ethan, and you've probably seen his face before without realizing it. So, is he really my dad?" Ethan's eyes shone with a mix of hope and confusion. Linda's throat constricted. "Let's talk to him together and see what he says, okay?" It was a feeble answer, but she couldn't deny it outright anymore, nor could she fully confirm it. She knew the truth in her heart, but Ethan needed to hear it from Caldwell himself. Ethan accepted this with surprising composure. Linda helped him into his new clothes, a plain polo and jeans, a size too big but serviceable. She tried to neaten her own appearance, brushing out her hair and tidying her uniform as best she could. The house felt unusually quiet, and she assumed the staff was maintaining their usual hush. "Ready?" she asked Ethan, voice trembling slightly. He nodded, slipping his hand into hers. Together they left the guest room, walking down the wide hallway lined with paintings. Linda recognized a few of the names, classic American artists, and realized these pieces alone were worth more than she'd ever earn in a lifetime. She tried not to dwell on it, focusing instead on the immediate task of talking to Caldwell. They descended the staircase, footsteps muffled by the plush runner that graced the center of each step. The foyer's marble floors gleamed in morning light. Linda spotted a pair of polished double doors that likely led to some formal living area. But she heard Barbara's voice from the left, so they headed that way, eventually coming upon a cozy sunroom where windows stretched almost to the ceiling. Charles Caldwell stood there, dressed far more casually than the night before, khakis and a button-down shirt. He looked strangely out of place in such casual attire, as though not fully comfortable outside his usual business suits. Despite this, he managed a tentative smile at their arrival. On a small table, Linda saw an array of breakfast foods: eggs, toast, fruit, coffee, and juice. A whiff of bacon made her stomach rumble. "Good morning," Caldwell said, his gaze flickering first to Linda, then settling on Ethan. "I hope you both slept all right." Linda cleared her throat, nodding. "We did, thank you." Ethan squeezed her hand tighter, standing close. He'd never been shy around strangers, but this felt different. He was measuring every detail, every move Caldwell made. Caldwell gestured to the food. "Please, help yourselves. I wasn't sure what you like, but I asked Barbara to prepare a variety." "Thank you," Linda replied, guiding Ethan to the table. She poured him some juice and made a small plate of fruit and toast. For herself, she opted for coffee. Her nerves were too raw to handle much food yet. Ethan took a seat and started nibbling a slice of melon. After an awkward pause, Caldwell approached the table, keeping a slight distance as if wary of startling Ethan. "Do you like sports?" he asked gently, attempting conversation. "I used to play Little League when I was your age." Ethan perked up a bit. "I like soccer. Mom says I'm good at running." "That's great," Caldwell responded, voice warming. "Do you play at school or in a youth league?" Ethan glanced at Linda, who gave him a reassuring nod. "At school sometimes. We don't have a league 'cause—" He hesitated, uncertain how to finish. Linda felt a sting of guilt. She'd never been able to afford the fees for extracurricular clubs. Before the moment grew more uncomfortable, Caldwell smoothly changed tack. "Well, if you ever want to try a league or even just practice, I'd love to help. I have a big yard out back. We could set up some goals, maybe." Ethan blinked, caught between curiosity and hesitation. "Maybe," he said shyly. Linda's heart twisted at this tentative exchange. Ethan was so innocent, so willing to believe in new possibilities. She found herself both terrified and hopeful that Caldwell might be genuine. Caldwell cleared his throat and looked at Linda. "You mentioned last night you wanted to see action, not just promises. I thought about that. I have a proposal, if you're willing to hear it." Her stomach fluttered. She cradled her coffee mug, letting its warmth steady her. "All right." He took a breath, choosing words carefully. "First, I want to do a formal paternity test, so no one can question Ethan's legitimacy, including any of my business associates or attorneys. Once that's established, I'll be able to put everything in writing. Legal acknowledgement, financial support, whatever you decide is best for Ethan." Ethan observed them, brows knitting with confusion at words like paternity test and legitimacy. Linda stroked his hair, trying to keep him calm. She remembered the humiliating notion of a test, like she needed proof that Ethan was Caldwell's son. But she also recognized the necessity. Given Caldwell's wealth and influence, official paperwork was a shield. "Okay," she said quietly. "I understand, and after that?" "After that, we can talk about visitation, custody arrangements. Anything you think Ethan needs." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. "I know I have no right to barge into your life and demand time with him, but I'd like the chance if you'll let me." Linda sensed the sincerity in his tone. She also pictured the avalanche of legal complications that would follow. Visitation schedules, child support, a potential custody fight if things went sideways. Part of her wanted to run screaming, but for Ethan, having a father figure could be priceless if Caldwell meant what he said. "That's reasonable," she managed, her voice tremulous. "We'll do the test, and then we'll figure things out." Ethan broke the tension by piping up, "Does this mean I can call you Dad?" Both adults turned to him. Caldwell's mouth opened and closed, clearly overwhelmed by the child's directness. Linda's pulse hammered, unsure if she should intervene, but Caldwell knelt beside Ethan's chair, looking him in the eye. "I can't tell you what to do," Caldwell said softly, "but if it turns out I'm really your father and you feel comfortable, I'd be honored to hear you call me that." His eyes shone with unsaid emotion, and Linda could see him fighting to keep composure. Ethan's cheeks colored. "Okay," he said simply. Then he took another bite of melon, as though that settled the matter. Linda sat there, astonished at how simple the child's acceptance seemed, while the adults tangled themselves in knots of doubt. She glanced at Caldwell, who rose to his feet with a shaky sigh, trying to mask the depth of his feelings. In that moment, Barbara stepped into the sunroom once again, bearing a leather-bound folder. She handed it to Caldwell discreetly. "These arrived by courier early this morning," she informed him. Then, with a polite nod, she exited. Caldwell opened the folder to reveal a sheaf of official-looking documents and a typed letter. His expression hardened. "These are from my board of directors," he explained to Linda. "They got wind of last night's incident." He paused, reading quickly. The lines around his mouth tightened. "They're urging me to release a public statement clarifying my status, essentially denying or confirming the paternity rumor before it affects the company's stock." Linda's stomach sank. She hadn't factored in the business ramifications. Caldwell Industries was massive, and presumably investors balked at any hint of scandal. She saw a flicker of desperation cross Caldwell's face. "I won't deny anything," he stated decisively, closing the folder. "But I also don't want to parade you and Ethan in front of cameras until we've sorted things out privately. Let me handle this." She managed a nod, feeling the reality of their situation expanding. This wasn't just about forging a relationship, it was about the glare of the media, the effect on Caldwell's corporate empire, and the possibility of relentless gossip for her and Ethan. Ethan, oblivious to the adult concerns, finished his fruit and looked at them expectantly. "So, can we play soccer later?" Linda let out a half laugh, half sigh. Such a simple question, so far removed from the complexities swirling around them. Caldwell gave Ethan a small, warm smile. "Sure, buddy. We might have to go shopping for a soccer ball, though." The child nodded, satisfied for now. And in that moment, Linda realized that no matter what happened, they'd have to take it one step at a time, guided not by corporate boards or media demands, but by the needs of the little boy who just wanted to kick a ball around a yard with someone who might be his dad. "Let's get the test done first," Linda interjected, her voice steady. "Then we can talk about soccer practice and everything else once we know the results. Agreed?" Caldwell exhaled slowly, relief mingling with the tension still knotting his shoulders. "Agreed." They exchanged a silent understanding, sealed by Ethan's innocent grin. For the first time, Linda felt a glimmer of hope that this precarious arrangement might hold. But she couldn't ignore the storm clouds brewing on the horizon, the press, the legal complexities, and the lingering bitterness of feeling abandoned all those years ago. Still, for Ethan's sake, she would face whatever came next, one day, one challenge at a time. That same afternoon, the air outside was warm and tinged with the scent of late-blooming roses. Yet Linda felt a chill in her bones as she followed Charles Caldwell down a long, sparkling corridor at the Whitebridge Medical Center. Ethan clung to her hand, peering curiously at the polished floor and the staffers who bustled by in scrubs and lab coats. Caldwell had arranged a rush appointment at this private clinic, one discreet enough to handle high-profile patients. Linda couldn't ignore how easily he navigated this privileged world. A quick phone call, a few murmured instructions, and they found themselves led to a tranquil waiting room, far from the prying eyes of other visitors. The plan was straightforward. They'd run a paternity test using a simple cheek swab from both Caldwell and Ethan, with Linda present. Results would be expedited and delivered in 24 hours. "That's not typical," Caldwell had admitted earlier, "but I'm sparing no expense." Linda tried to remain calm for Ethan's sake, though her heart thudded with every step. She couldn't shake the memory of the anxious nights she'd spent years ago waiting for phone calls that never came. Now, this test would provide not just official proof of Ethan's father, but also a massive turning point in their lives. She sensed Caldwell's tension, too. He normally radiated confidence, yet now he walked with an undercurrent of apprehension, as though each footfall could bring fresh complications. They arrived at a discreet lab on the clinic's top floor. A kind-looking woman in a white coat, Dr. Phillips, read her name tag, invited them into a small, bright office. She had gentle eyes and spoke softly, introducing herself first to Ethan, making sure he felt at ease. "Hi, Ethan," Dr. Phillips said, kneeling so she was at his level. "I'm going to take a quick sample from the inside of your cheek with a little swab, okay? It won't hurt at all." Ethan looked at Linda, who nodded encouragement. "All right," he replied. The test itself took barely a minute. Ethan opened his mouth dutifully while Dr. Phillips swiped the inside of his cheek. She then handed a fresh swab to Caldwell, and he did the same. The quiet calm of the procedure somehow made Linda's nerves crackle even more. This was it, the final step to confirm what she already knew in her heart. But Linda also recognized that part of her had refused to let herself fully believe it until now. Ethan watched curiously, then asked, "Why are you doing that to him too?" pointing at Caldwell. Dr. Phillips smiled. "We're just checking to see if Mr. Caldwell's cells match up with yours in a special pattern. It helps us know if he's related to you by blood." Ethan absorbed that, then looked to Caldwell. "So we'll know for sure if you're my dad?" Caldwell's throat bobbed. "Yes, we'll know for sure," he said quietly. Satisfied with the answer, Ethan slid off the chair and wandered to a corner of the room, where Dr. Phillips had a little basket of children's books. Linda joined him, leaving Caldwell to speak with the doctor about how quickly the lab could process everything. She heard phrases like extremely discreet, highest priority, and security measures, but her focus was on Ethan. He flipped the pages of a picture book absent-mindedly. Linda could tell he was only half looking at the illustrations. He was thinking, just as she was, about what this test might bring. Guilt twisted in her chest. She wished she could have spared him all this confusion. But how? She'd done what she thought was best at the time, forging ahead alone, stifling her heartbreak whenever Ethan asked about his missing dad. Now all of that was unraveling in a single day. A few minutes later, Caldwell gently touched Linda's elbow. "It's done," he said. "They'll call us tomorrow as soon as results are in." She nodded, scooping up Ethan's backpack. "All right, let's go." They made their way back to the main lobby, Dr. Phillips waving goodbye. Linda thanked her politely, while Ethan offered a small grin. Then the three stepped through automatic glass doors into bright afternoon sunlight. As Mark pulled the sleek sedan onto the road, Linda peered out the window at passing pedestrians and traffic. She felt as though her own life were moving in fast forward, everything shifting too quickly to process. Ethan stared at her from the opposite seat, his expression solemn. Caldwell, seated up front, spoke in low tones to Mark, presumably giving instructions. Eventually, the car slowed before a neighborhood Linda recognized as a middle-class district, not shabby but far from Caldwell's mansion. It took her a moment to understand why. "You asked me where we live," she said, remembering Caldwell's question that morning. "You want to see my place?" Caldwell glanced over his shoulder. "Only if that's all right with you. I'd like to see where Ethan has grown up. And if there's anything you need, Linda, maybe I can help." She hesitated, feeling both embarrassed and oddly relieved. "We're around the corner, on Maple Street." When they reached the modest apartment building, Linda's cheeks warmed. The place was clean but worn. A few of the windows had cracks taped over and the lawn needed mowing. She swallowed her pride. "This is it," she murmured to Ethan, who looked equally uncertain. Caldwell studied the exterior thoughtfully, then asked Mark to park. Ethan hopped out first, Linda following. Caldwell exited slowly, letting his gaze roam over the unassuming complex. For a moment, Linda felt defensive. This was all she could afford. How dare he judge? But his face showed no hint of condescension. They walked up 2 flights of stairs, the hallway lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Linda's keys jangled as she unlocked the door to her small 2-bedroom apartment. Inside, the space was neat. She prided herself on keeping it clean despite her busy schedule. The living room was furnished simply with a couch, an old recliner, and a coffee table stacked with Ethan's crayons and homework. Faded curtains let in a soft glow from the mid-afternoon sun. "Mom, can I go to my room?" Ethan asked softly. Linda smiled. "Sure, honey." She gestured down the narrow hallway. "Remember, we're not going to stay long." Ethan disappeared into his bedroom, leaving Linda and Caldwell in an awkward hush. She watched as he glanced around, taking in the battered but cozy surroundings. There was a moment of tension, as though Linda expected him to start criticizing. Instead, he turned to her, face gentle. "You've made a good home for him," he said. That simple comment released a knot in her chest. She hadn't realized she'd been waiting for some disapproving remark or a pitying stare. Instead, Caldwell seemed genuinely respectful. Linda murmured, "Thank you, I do my best." Caldwell wandered over to a small bookshelf, scanning the titles of well-worn children's stories. He paused at a framed photo on a side table, Ethan at maybe 4 years old, wearing a homemade Halloween costume. "He's grown so much," Caldwell whispered, as if the weight of lost time suddenly pressed on him. Linda crossed her arms, unsure what to say. This man, Ethan's likely father, was stepping into a life that had been ticking along without him for years. She was filled with a mix of empathy and lingering resentment. She opened her mouth to speak but was interrupted by Ethan's voice from the hallway. "Mom, can I show him my trophies?" he called. Linda blinked in surprise. Her son had kept 2 small plastic trophies, one from a spelling bee, another for participation in school sports day. They were minor achievements, but he cherished them. She realized with a jolt that Ethan wanted Caldwell to see them, an instinctive desire for approval from the man he believed could be his dad. Caldwell stepped toward the hallway, casting a questioning glance at Linda. She nodded. "Sure, Ethan wants you to see," she said softly. When they reached Ethan's tiny room, Caldwell paused in the doorway. Posters of soccer players covered the walls. A thrift store desk stood in the corner, covered with pencil sketches and half-finished craft projects. On a makeshift shelf above the bed stood the 2 trophies, each only a few inches tall. Ethan beamed, pointing to the spelling bee trophy. "This one's from last year. I spelled chocolate right when everyone else got it wrong." Caldwell bent to examine it, a warm smile tugging at his lips. "Impressive," he said. "Chocolate can be tricky." Ethan nodded proudly, then gestured to the second trophy. "And this one was for a race I ran in 1st grade. I got 8th place, but everyone who finished got an award." Linda saw Caldwell's smile twitch. He recognized a participation trophy just as well as she did. Yet instead of belittling it, he looked at Ethan with genuine respect. "Hey, finishing the race is something to be proud of." Ethan lit up, obviously gratified by the validation. Linda's heart softened further, seeing the subtle way Caldwell handled her son's earnestness. For the first time she felt a spark of genuine hope that this might work. But then a knock sounded at the front door. Linda's pulse spiked. She rarely had visitors aside from a neighbor who sometimes asked for a cup of sugar. She hesitated, uncertain whether it could be a reporter or some busybody from the building who'd recognized Caldwell's face. "Stay here," Linda murmured, heading to the living room. Caldwell followed quietly, stepping behind her as she approached the door. She peered through the peephole and saw a familiar face, her boss from the catering company. Linda's blood ran cold. She'd vanished from the gala last night without permission, leaving him to handle a fiasco. She'd probably lost her job. Shakily, she unlatched the door. "Mr. Barnes," she said. "Hello?" Her boss, a short, stocky man, frowned. He looked ready to unleash a torrent of reprimands. But then his eyes landed on Caldwell, and he froze. "Linda, is this—" Caldwell stepped forward, polite but firm. "Charles Caldwell," he introduced himself. "Good afternoon." Barnes blinked, clearly out of his depth. He alternated glances between Linda and Caldwell, voice stammering. I came here to find out what happened. You disappeared with your son. The event was chaos afterward." Linda braced herself. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Ethan was missing, and then— well, you saw the scene. I had to make sure he was safe." Barnes nodded, though exasperation lingered. "Look, Linda, I know it was a big shock, but you left us scrambling. The client complained, and I have to—" He paused, clearly trying to weigh his words in the presence of a billionaire. Caldwell took a small step forward, gently placing a hand at Linda's shoulder. I apologize if my private situation created trouble for your staff. Linda was simply trying to protect her child. Barnes looked like he wanted to protest, but ultimately deflated. He scratched the back of his neck. Well, yes, I understand. But we're a small company, and we rely on big accounts like that. We nearly lost the contract when Linda vanished. The clients demanded an explanation. Linda swallowed hard, trying not to tremble. Barnes was a decent man, but business was business. She wanted to keep her job, needed it to pay rent. Then she felt Caldwell's presence steadying her, and she remembered how easily he'd navigated the world of wealth. Caldwell's gaze sharpened with purpose. Barnes, is it? If the gala organizers have any lingering issues, direct them to me. I'll see to it that your company not only retains its contract but is fairly compensated for the inconvenience. Barnes blinked. You mean that? Yes, Caldwell said simply. Provide your details to Mark, my driver. He'll handle the paperwork. Consider any damage control done. A stunned silence filled the room. Linda caught Barnes's astounded expression. The man's frustration softened to gratitude. That's very generous, Barnes stuttered. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Caldwell nodded graciously. Linda almost felt sorry for her boss. He was overwhelmed, unprepared for the magnitude of Caldwell's sphere of influence. Barnes cleared his throat and turned to Linda. So, does this mean you'll be back at work next week? Linda exhaled, relief seeping through her. Yes, she said. I'm so sorry about last night. I promise it won't happen again. Barnes attempted a faint smile. All right, Linda, just keep me informed next time, okay? And good luck. With that, he glanced once more at Caldwell, still astonished, and left. The door clicked shut. Linda felt like she'd narrowly avoided a disaster that might have compounded her already tangled situation. She turned to Caldwell, uncertain how to express her gratitude. Thank you, she managed. I don't know what to say. His features relaxed. You don't have to say anything, I just wanted to help. He glanced toward Ethan's room. Your job is important. I respect that. Linda nodded, feeling her throat tighten with emotion she couldn't fully articulate. Minutes ago, she feared she'd be unemployed. Now, Caldwell had straightened everything out with effortless calm, yet she also knew she needed to stand on her own 2 feet. This fragile alliance couldn't become an endless cycle of him swooping in to fix everything. Somehow, Caldwell seemed to read her thoughts. I'm not trying to intrude, he said gently. I realize it's been my world versus yours for a long time. I just want to be useful. A wave of conflicting feelings washed over her. Appreciation, wariness, relief, fear of being indebted. I know, she answered softly. Let's just focus on the test results first, and we'll handle the rest after we see those. He nodded. Behind them, Ethan's door creaked, and the boy peeked out, seemingly sensing the tension had passed. Linda motioned him over, patting the couch in the living room. He scampered forward, glancing curiously at the door. Everything okay? Ethan asked. Yes, Linda assured him, ruffling his hair. It's all okay. Caldwell offered the child a small smile. We just had an unexpected visitor, that's all. Nothing to worry about. Ethan hopped onto the couch, hugging one of the throw pillows. So, can we go get that soccer ball now? The question, so simple in the wake of drama, made Linda laugh despite herself. Caldwell exhaled a low chuckle. I think we can manage that. It struck Linda that life was moving forward whether she was ready or not. Paternity tests, corporate meddling, overshadowed by a boy's innocent wish to play. Maybe that was the best reminder she needed. At the center of all this chaos, Ethan's happiness mattered most. All right then, she said, lifting her chin. We'll get a soccer ball, and we'll wait for tomorrow's call about the test. One step at a time. Exactly, Caldwell agreed. He offered a hand to Ethan, who took it shyly. Together, the three left the modest apartment, forging an unspoken pact that, come what may, they would at least attempt to face it together, united by a child's hope and the possibility of a family they never thought they'd form. That night, Linda barely slept. After returning from the clinic and dropping by the store for a new soccer ball, she and Ethan had spent a few quiet hours at Charles Caldwell's estate. Despite the house's grandeur, the time felt surprisingly ordinary. They shared a light dinner Barbara prepared, then Ethan and Charles went into the backyard for a short, impromptu soccer practice. Linda watched from the terrace with a mix of anxiety and cautious hope. Every so often she'd catch Caldwell staring at Ethan with unguarded amazement, like he was discovering a precious gift he never knew he'd lost. But once dusk settled, Linda insisted on returning to her own apartment. She still wasn't ready to accept Caldwell's invitation to stay overnight. She also sensed Ethan needed familiar surroundings after such an overwhelming day. Charles had respected her decision, offering a driver and reaffirming he'd wait for the test results before discussing anything more official. Now, tucked into her own bed in her modest bedroom, Linda found her thoughts spinning. Every time she closed her eyes, the day's events replayed. The hush in the clinic as the swabs were taken, the relieved look on her boss's face when Caldwell promised to smooth things over, the rare smiles Ethan gave the man he might soon call Dad. Eventually, well past midnight, Linda dozed off. A fitful sleep took hold, punctuated by anxious dreams she couldn't fully remember come morning. She woke to the mechanical buzz of her alarm, a sad, tinny sound from an older model clock she could barely afford to replace. Her eyes felt gritty, her body heavy, but an urgent sense of duty propelled her out of bed. Ethan would need breakfast before school, and she had a shift that afternoon at the catering company. As she rose, she glanced at the phone on her nightstand, half expecting a text or missed call from Caldwell's staff. Nothing yet. The paternity results weren't supposed to come until midday, though. "Mom?" Ethan's voice, still thick with sleep, drifted through the crack in her door. "Do I have to go to school today?" Linda pulled the door open to see him huddled in the hallway, hair mussed, hugging a small plush dinosaur. "Yes," she said gently. "Unless you're sick?" He shook his head. "I'm just worried." She offered a comforting smile, guiding him to the kitchen. "I know, baby. Waiting is hard. But let's keep our routine, okay? We'll hear news soon enough." He nodded, biting his lip. Linda tried to lighten the mood as she prepared cereal and fruit, talking about the upcoming school carnival, whether he wanted to volunteer for the talent show. Ethan responded in short, distracted murmurs. She understood. Any child might be restless awaiting the verdict on whether a wealthy stranger was truly his dad. Linda had just dropped Ethan off at school when her phone buzzed. Anxiety shot through her. She parked by the curb and checked the screen. Unknown number. She quickly picked up. "Ms. Thompson," said a clear, professional female voice. "This is Dr. Phillips at Whitebridge Medical Center. The paternity test results are in. I'd like to confirm you, Mr. Caldwell, and your son can come in at noon so I can share them privately?" Linda's stomach flipped. "Yes, I can be there," she managed. "Thank you." As soon as she hung up, her hands trembled on the steering wheel. It was only 9 in the morning and her shift started at 11. She felt torn. She needed the job, but also she couldn't possibly miss this appointment. Summoning her courage, she dialed her boss. "Mr. Barnes? I'm sorry, but an urgent matter came up. I need the afternoon off. Could I please switch to a later shift?" There was a brief pause on the other end. "Linda," Barnes sighed, "I was hoping you could help prep for an event tonight, but after everything that happened, I suppose we can manage." He sounded more resigned than angry. "We'll shuffle some schedules. Just come in after 5. Gratitude welled up in Linda's throat. "Thank you, Mr. Barnes. I'll do extra cleanup tonight to make up for it." "Sure. Good luck, Linda." With that, the call ended. Exhaling shakily, Linda texted Caldwell the update. "Results are ready at noon. We should meet at the clinic. She tapped send and lingered, staring at the phone's screen as if it might reveal how he felt. The device remained silent for about 10 minutes. Then it buzzed with a reply. "I'll pick you up at 11:30. We'll go together." At exactly 11:30, a black sedan eased to a stop outside Linda's apartment building. She was already waiting on the sidewalk, phone clutched in hand. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Caldwell in the front seat. Mark hopped out to open the rear door for Linda. "Morning," Caldwell greeted, nodding politely. He looked more formal today, back in a tailored suit, his posture stiff, eyes clouded with tension. "How are you holding up?" Linda slid into the back seat, trying to keep her heart from pounding too loudly. "I'm all right," she lied. "Have you called Ethan's school? Does he know we're getting the results now?" Caldwell shook his head, turning slightly to address her through the gap in the front seats. "I figured it might be best to confirm the outcome first. Then we can decide how to share it with him. Is that okay?" She nodded. Part of her had pictured picking Ethan up so he could hear the news firsthand, but maybe Caldwell was right. If, by some remote chance, the test came back negative, it might confuse Ethan even more. They drove in relative silence. Linda's mind churned with every possibility, even though logically she was certain what the result would be. She tried to recall the exact day she'd last seen Caldwell all those years ago. A swirl of heartbreak and unanswered messages. There was no one else who could possibly be Ethan's father. This test was just a formality, right? Still, dread gnawed at her. She glanced at Caldwell, who tapped his foot anxiously, eyes scanning passing cars. He looked like a man bracing for a jury's verdict, not the unstoppable CEO who usually exuded confidence. When they arrived at the clinic, Dr. Phillips was waiting in the same private office. She offered a tight smile as they entered. "Thank you both for coming promptly," she said, gesturing them to sit at a small round table. "And I appreciate your request for discretion. We'll keep everything sealed and confidential." Linda and Caldwell took seats side by side, though they left a respectable distance between them. Dr. Phillips opened a folder, her expression professional but kind. Linda gripped the edge of her chair, pulse hammering. "It's conclusive," Dr. Phillips said gently. "Charles Caldwell, the probability of paternity is over 99.9999%. Effectively, there's no doubt Ethan is your biological son." Relief surged through Linda like a tidal wave. She felt her shoulders slump, tension uncoiling. Even though she'd known in her heart, hearing it officially stated banished every lingering doubt. She glanced at Caldwell, who let out a shaky exhale, eyes glimmering with an emotion she couldn't immediately name. Gratitude? Overwhelm? Something deeper? He turned to Linda, voice thick. "He's mine," he said softly, as if the words themselves held transformative power. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "He is." Dr. Phillips handed them sealed copies of the official results, then closed the folder. "I'll leave you two to discuss. If you need anything else, my assistant can arrange a follow-up." They thanked her and left the office in a subdued hush, test documents clutched in their hands. Once out in the hallway, Linda realized Caldwell was trembling slightly, breath uneven. She touched his arm, concerned. "Are you all right?" she asked, searching his face. He gave a brittle laugh, one that held neither mirth nor scorn. "I think I'm finally realizing just how much I missed out on. 7 years. A son I never knew." His eyes flicked to the papers. This is real." Linda's chest tightened. The edges of her resentment softened at his visible remorse. She knew well that heartbreak of lost time, though she'd lived it differently, forging ahead alone. Gently, she pulled him away from the main corridors, finding a small alcove where they could speak privately. "We can't change the past," she said quietly, "but we can decide how to handle the future. Right now, Ethan is at school not knowing that, well, you're officially his dad." Caldwell swallowed. "How do we tell him? Do we just go pick him up and say, Guess what, son? I'm your father for sure. His attempt at levity fell flat. Both of them recognized the weight behind those words. Linda managed a small shrug. Maybe we keep it simple. He already suspects. He was the one who recognized you first, in a way. Let's just show him the test results, reassure him, and let him call you Dad if he wants. Caldwell nodded, expression thoughtful. I also want to set up a formal arrangement, legally I mean. He's my heir, Linda, my entire estate, my responsibilities. I have to protect him, and you, from whatever might come next. Apprehension thrummed through her. She pictured Caldwell's board of directors, press statements, sniping tabloids. I understand, but we'll go at Ethan's pace. He doesn't need the whole corporate circus yet. He's just a kid. Agreed. No press conferences, no forced appearances. Caldwell's face softened. I'll handle any media pressure. You two won't have to stand in front of cameras if you don't want to. Relief washed over Linda. She hadn't realized how much she'd dreaded being thrown into a public spotlight. Thank you. They walked slowly toward the elevators. Let's pick Ethan up from school, Caldwell suggested. If you agree, I'd love to take him somewhere he likes, ice cream or a park, to tell him in a friendly, relaxed setting. Linda considered. On one hand, it was more time away from work. On the other, Barnes had granted her leeway today, and telling Ethan in a calm, comfortable place sounded better than a hurried conversation outside the school gates. That might be good, she conceded. He loves the old town ice cream parlor near the library. It's quiet on weekdays. Caldwell smiled, a shadow of excitement sparking in his eyes. Let's do that then. By 1 o'clock, they were idling outside Ethan's elementary school. Parents' cars lined the pickup zone, but few recognized the black sedan or connected it to the face that had caused a minor city scandal just days earlier. Linda hopped out, stepping into the warm, midday sunshine. She beckoned to Caldwell, who exited more hesitantly. This was new territory for him, picking up a child from school. A wave of kids tumbled out of the building, laughter echoing across the pavement. Linda spotted Ethan's brown hair in the crowd. He hesitated upon noticing Caldwell, but then he flashed a tentative smile. "Mom, you're both here?" he asked, eyebrows lifting. Linda reached for his hand. "Yes, baby. We have something important to share. But first, how was your day?" Ethan shrugged. "It was okay. I told my friend Jake about the big house we visited and he didn't believe me." He glanced warily at Caldwell. "Did you find out the test results?" Caldwell bent down, voice gentle. "We did. The test says I'm your father, Ethan." A small gasp escaped the boy. He froze, as if absorbing the final confirmation. "Really? You're not just saying that?" Linda felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded, smoothing back Ethan's hair. "It's true." For an instant, Ethan stood there, processing. Then, without warning, he flung himself at Caldwell, hugging him around the waist. Caldwell stiffened, then wrapped his arms around the boy in a careful, hesitant embrace. Linda's throat constricted. It was the scene she'd once imagined in distant daydreams but never thought she'd actually see. Ethan pulled back, cheeks red, eyes shining. "Does that mean I can call you Dad all the time now?" Caldwell's voice came out thick. "Yes, buddy. Anytime you want." The moment was pure, unguarded, and Linda realized that for Ethan, acceptance came easily. It was the adults who bore the complications. She blinked back tears, leaning in to put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Dad wants to take us for ice cream," she said. "Want to go?" Ethan's face lit up. He still wore that word, Dad, like an exciting new toy. "Yes! Can we get the chocolate swirl?" Caldwell laughed, relief turning his voice lighter than Linda had heard in days. "You got it, kid." They piled into the car. The drive to the Old Town ice cream parlor took less than 15 minutes, but Linda's mind raced with the realization of how quickly their lives were changing. She caught Caldwell's eye in the rearview mirror. He appeared lost in a quiet joy, glancing at Ethan, who chattered about his day. When they arrived, the shop was nearly empty, just a retired couple reading newspapers at a corner table. Linda guided Ethan toward the counter, the cozy smell of waffle cones and sprinkles surrounding them. Caldwell seemed enchanted by the modest, cheerful setting. They found a booth by the window. Ethan dove into his chocolate swirl, leaving a smudge on his nose that made Linda laugh. Caldwell ordered a simple vanilla cone, though he hardly touched it, too absorbed in watching Ethan talk about school, soccer, and silly jokes he'd shared with friends. At some point, Ethan paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Dad?" he asked softly, testing the word again. Caldwell looked at him, eyes gentle. "Do you think we can practice soccer more often now?" Caldwell reached out and ruffled Ethan's hair, a tentative, affectionate gesture. "I'd love that. Maybe even sign you up for a youth league if you want." Ethan beamed. Linda's chest tightened. She realized, with near certainty, that Ethan had never glowed like this in front of any other adult figure. The newness of it all reminded her they still had hurdles to clear, like Caldwell's corporate world, the legalities, the question of where they'd live. But in that booth, with the taste of ice cream sweet on her tongue, Linda allowed herself a moment of hope. They spent another half hour there, quietly letting the significance of the day settle in. A father, a mother, and a child, together, if still slightly unsure of how to fit into each other's lives. Eventually, Linda glanced at her watch, remembering her shift at 5. She dabbed a napkin on Ethan's chin. "We should go soon." Caldwell's eyes flickered with regret. "Of course. I'll drive you." "But Linda—" He paused, seeming unsure how to proceed. "I want us to move forward, legally and as a family in some capacity. Can we meet again tomorrow, maybe with an attorney present to talk about next steps?" Linda inhaled. She knew this was inevitable. Custody papers, child support, official documents. She also knew it was the safest route for Ethan's future, especially if Caldwell's world tried to shut them out. "Yes," she said, forcing composure. "We can do that." Ethan looked between them, frowning slightly. "You guys are talking about grown-up stuff again, aren't you?" They both laughed, an easy, shared moment of understanding. Caldwell patted Ethan's shoulder. "We are, but it's to make sure you're taken care of." "Okay," Ethan said, shrugging, "as long as I can still have ice cream sometimes." "Always," Caldwell promised, and Linda sensed the sincerity behind his casual word. They returned to the sedan, heading back to Linda's apartment building so she could prepare for work. The mood remained subdued, yet strangely peaceful. After a morning spent dreading the test results, the confirmation had actually brought relief and the unstoppable beginnings of forging some kind of family bond. As Linda climbed out of the car, Caldwell stepped around to the sidewalk. "I'll call you tonight," he murmured. "Or text. We'll set up the attorney meeting." She nodded, uncertain how to navigate the delicate space between them, gratitude, anger over the past, and hope for the future all colliding. "Sounds good. Thank you, Charles. For everything." He gave a small, wry smile. "Call me Charles all you want, but don't be surprised if Ethan starts demanding you call me Dad, too." He attempted to joke, but Linda heard the underlying excitement in his tone. She let out a shaky laugh. "We'll see," she said lightly. Then she turned, guiding Ethan toward the stairwell. She glanced back once, catching Caldwell's lingering gaze. Neither spoke, but the understanding between them felt undeniable. The test results were only the first step. The real work, building trust, forging a family out of strangers, was just beginning. As Linda and Ethan ascended the steps, the sun dipped behind the apartment complex, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Perhaps, she thought, it wasn't just the ending of one day, but the dawn of a whole new chapter in their lives. One with a father in Ethan's world, and maybe, for Linda, a second chance at rewriting the old, painful story she'd carried alone for so long. The following day dawned cool and overcast. as though the skies themselves felt the gravity of the path Linda and Charles Caldwell were about to tread. She had barely finished helping Ethan with breakfast when her phone buzzed. Charles's name lit up on the screen. "Good morning," he said softly when she answered. The warmth in his voice was evident, but Linda also sensed a trace of tension. "I've set up a meeting with my attorney for 1 o'clock. He's clearing his schedule to accommodate us, and I'd like you and Ethan to join me at my office, if that's all right." Linda glanced at Ethan, who was finishing his cereal at the kitchen table, swinging his feet above the floor. She still wrestled with the dissonance that in less than a day life had shifted so drastically. Now her son knew his father, and soon they'd be signing legal papers about it. "Sure," she said at last, "but I'm not sure if Ethan needs to be there. He has school." Charles paused. "True. I was thinking he could meet us afterward, but it's your call. This meeting will focus mostly on adult matters. Custody, support, next steps. Might be best to keep him away from the legal jargon." Linda sighed, relieved. "Yes, let's leave him in school for now. After the meeting, we can decide what to share. I'll arrange someone to pick him up if we run late." "All right," Charles agreed. "I'll send Mark at noon to bring you to my office. We'll go from there." Once she hung up, Linda turned to Ethan, whose gaze was a mix of curiosity and mild concern. "It's just a grown-up thing, honey," she said gently, ruffling his hair. "You'll stay in class and then I'll come get you, don't worry." He nodded, though she could tell he wasn't entirely comfortable being left out. The swirl of events in the past couple of days had made him more cautious. But Linda knew he was safer and probably happier, maintaining his routine rather than sitting through hours of legal talk. True to his word, Mark arrived in the sleek black sedan precisely at noon. Linda took a deep breath, locked up her apartment, and headed downstairs. Her mind buzzed with apprehensions. How formal would this be? Would Caldwell's attorney try to push her into any arrangement she didn't want? When Linda climbed into the back seat, she found Charles already there, tapping away on a tablet. His eyes lifted to hers, and he must have noticed the tension in her posture, because he offered a tight, reassuring smile. "You okay?" he asked, shutting off the screen of his tablet. "Just anxious," Linda admitted, folding her hands in her lap. "I've never really dealt with attorneys outside of small claims or a public defender for a traffic ticket. This is uncharted territory." Charles nodded sympathetically. "I understand. My attorney, John Landon, has been with my family's business for over a decade. He's a good man, very discreet and mindful of personal matters. He'll respect your perspective." Linda tried to let that soothe her nerves. Yet, as they wove through city streets, a flutter of panic wouldn't abate. She worried about hidden clauses, about custody fights, about somehow losing Ethan. "Remember," she told herself, "you have rights. You're Ethan's mother. No one can take him away without cause." She glanced at Charles, who gazed at the passing skyline with a contemplative air. After a moment, he caught her looking and placed his hand on hers. "We'll figure this out together," he said softly. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it made Linda's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. Caldwell Industries was headquartered in a shimmering glass tower in the financial district. Mark rolled up to the building's private entrance, where a uniformed security guard waved them through. Linda felt dwarfed by the sheer scale of the lobby. Polished marble floors, towering ceilings, and crisp, modern decor. A hush pervaded the air, as if every conversation was quietly purposeful. The employees who passed in suits and pencil skirts offered polite nods to Charles, but Linda sensed the subtle curiosity in their eyes. "Mr. Caldwell," a receptionist greeted, stepping from behind a sleek front desk. "Mr. Landon is expecting you in conference room 3 on the 38th floor." Charles thanked her, then guided Linda to a set of private elevators. As they soared upwards, Linda tried not to stare at her reflection in the gleaming metal walls. She felt self-conscious in her simple blouse and slacks. She'd dressed neatly, but she knew she looked out of place in a corporate tower that probably hosted multi-million-dollar deals daily. When they reached the 38th floor, Charles led her down a hushed hallway lined with abstract art. Conference Room 3 was a corner suite with sweeping city views. Inside, a man in his early 50s rose from a glass-top table. His hair was salt and pepper, and he wore a tailored suit, but his kindly expression eased Linda's initial wariness. "John Landon," the man introduced himself, extending a hand. "Pleased to meet you, Ms. Thompson." She shook his hand. "Linda," she said, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice." "It's no trouble," Landon assured. He gestured for them to sit around the table. "Charles, you mentioned the paternity test was conclusive?" Charles nodded, sliding a copy of the test results across the table. "Ethan is my biological son, and we want to formalize everything necessary to protect him." Landon examined the document with a quick, practiced eye. "Congratulations," he said, then looked at Linda with genuine warmth. "This is a major life event, and I imagine it may feel overwhelming." Linda blew out a breath, grateful for his empathy. "That's an understatement." Landon gave a small, understanding smile. "Let's approach this step by step. The immediate question: do you want Charles legally recognized as Ethan's father? That would involve adding him to Ethan's birth certificate, establishing paternal rights. Is that your intention, Ms. Thompson?" Linda hesitated, flicking her gaze to Charles. He offered a faint, encouraging nod. "Yes," she said at last. "I want Ethan's father to be recognized officially." Landon made a note. "Good. Next, we'll discuss custody. Typically, we can do joint legal custody if both parents agree that each will have a say in major decisions, education, healthcare, etc. Physical custody can be shared or assigned primarily to one parent with visitation for the other." Caldwell straightened. "I'd like joint custody, if Linda consents. I don't want to uproot Ethan's life, but I also want to be an active parent, not just a visitor." A surge of conflicting feelings rose in Linda. For so long, she'd been the sole decision-maker. The idea of sharing those choices with someone else, even Ethan's father, felt both relieving and intimidating. She took a moment before answering. "I'm open to joint legal custody. I want to make sure Ethan's day-to-day life isn't thrown into chaos. He's used to living with me, going to the same school." "Of course," Charles replied. "We can discuss a visitation schedule that respects his routine." Landon nodded. "We can note that Linda retains primary physical custody, with Charles having regular visitation or partial shared time. Over time, if you decide to adjust it, say, weekends with Charles or some nights a week at his home, that can be revised." Linda felt a surge of gratitude for the balanced approach. Yet she also wondered about the distance between Charles's estate and her modest apartment. Would Ethan bounce between two drastically different worlds? She pushed that question aside for now. Landon moved on. "Next is financial support. Ordinarily, there's a guideline for child support. But given Charles's resources, this might be more about ensuring Ethan's future. It can include contributions to daily expenses, health insurance, educational funds, and so forth." Caldwell inhaled slowly, leaning forward. "I want Ethan to have every opportunity. Private schooling, extracurriculars, college funds. I'll set up a trust in his name. Linda, I'm not trying to overshadow your upbringing, but if he wants to attend a top-tier school or do specialized programs, I'll cover it." Linda's emotions swelled again. She'd always done her best, but money was tight, and she often felt guilty for what she couldn't provide. Here was the father, offering a world of possibilities. It felt both like a blessing and a threat to her independence. She reminded herself it was all for Ethan. "That sounds good," she said quietly. "But I don't want him forced into anything. He's a sweet kid who likes his current school and his friends. Let's not drop him into some elite academy tomorrow." Charles gave a soft laugh, a note of relief there. "Agreed. We'll see what he wants, no pressure. Landon made more notes. So we're talking about a comprehensive plan. Child support, plus a trust for educational or extracurricular needs, established under Linda's guidance and oversight. That way, Ethan's future is secured, but Linda remains involved in every decision. Linda exhaled, finding a fragile sense of comfort in the idea. Yes, that would be ideal. The conversation flowed on for nearly an hour, peppered with more details: health insurance policies, emergency guardianship designations, even the question of traveling out of state. Linda stayed as focused as she could, though her mind reeled at the magnitude of it all. Charles, for his part, listened intently, occasionally interjecting to ensure Linda had final approval on each point. Landon seemed pleased by their willingness to cooperate. Finally, the attorney shuffled his notes into a neat stack. I'll draft a formal agreement reflecting what we've discussed. We can have it ready in a few days, then you both can review before signing. He looked at Linda kindly. Feel free to have your own lawyer examine it. We want everyone confident and comfortable. She swallowed, a hint of embarrassment creeping in. I don't really have an attorney, but maybe I should find one. This is bigger than anything I've dealt with. Landon's expression remained warm. I'd encourage it, yes. Legal documents can be intimidating, but an outside professional can confirm that your interests and Ethan's are fully protected. Linda nodded, feeling out of her depth but aware this was necessary. All right, I'll see if I can find someone reputable. Take your time, Caldwell added. There's no rush. Ethan's life won't be upended overnight just because we sign papers. She appreciated his sensitivity. Thank you, she whispered, the tension in her chest easing. Landon glanced at them both, clearing his throat. On a more personal note, off the record, I'm glad you're tackling this with cooperation. Not all families manage that. Ethan's lucky to have two parents who want his well-being first. A fragile smile touched Linda's lips. We're doing our best. Caldwell echoed that sentiment with a nod. They shook hands with Landon, collecting the preliminary notes. Linda noticed how Caldwell's hand lingered protectively at her elbow as they exited the conference room, guiding her down the hallway. Once they were back in the private elevator, Linda let out a shaky laugh. That was a lot. Caldwell slid his hands into his pockets, leaning against the elevator wall. Yes, it was, but it's just the start. You okay? I think so, she replied. It's just surreal. Yesterday, we worried about a test. Today, we're drafting a plan to share a child. Next, I guess we'll be tackling the rest of life. Media, extended family, maybe even where Ethan might spend weekends. He gave a small, thoughtful smile. One day at a time, he reminded gently, echoing her own mantra from the ice cream parlor. We'll keep Ethan's happiness front and center. She wanted to say more, about her fears, her longing for stability, the concern that once Caldwell's board got involved, everything could change. But the elevator pinged open at the lobby, letting in a rush of cool air and the bustle of employees. In a quiet corner near the exit, they paused. I have to pick up Ethan soon, Linda said. He'll be done with classes in about an hour. Do you want to come with me? Or do you have business? Caldwell consulted his watch. I have a quick meeting, but it should be over by then. If you don't mind waiting, I'll happily drive with you to get him. A twinge of warmth touched Linda's chest. That'd be nice, she admitted. He'll be thrilled you're there. They arranged to reconvene in a half hour. Linda waited in the building's cafe area, sipping on a latte that Charles insisted she try, apparently the best coffee in the district. She watched the city traffic through large glass windows, letting a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a black hole of uncertainty. There was a shape to it, albeit fragile and uncertain. But at least there was shape. After about 30 minutes, Caldwell reappeared, loosening his tie. Ready? He asked, offering that hint of a smile she was growing accustomed to. She nodded, heart fluttering. They stepped into the early afternoon sun, crossing to where Mark waited with the sedan. As they settled in the back seat, Linda allowed her shoulder to brush lightly against Caldwell's, a small point of contact that felt unexpectedly reassuring. Their eyes met, just for a heartbeat, sharing an unspoken understanding. Yes, it was complicated. Yes, they had a mountain of details to figure out. But for Ethan's sake, and maybe for their own, they were forging a path together. As Mark eased the car into the flow of traffic, Linda gazed out the window at the skyscrapers and bustling sidewalks. She wondered if life would ever again feel as simple as it had before Caldwell re-entered it. Likely not. But maybe, in the place of that old simplicity, they could build something more rewarding. A real family, complete with laughter, tears, and the honest intention to do better than yesterday. "Let's go pick up our son," Caldwell said softly, his voice a mixture of nerves and pride. Linda smiled, letting that phrase, "our son," wrap around her like a tentative promise. "Yes," she replied, breathing easier than she had in days. "Let's." The weekend arrived under a clear blue sky. Perfect weather for a soccer game in the backyard of Caldwell's estate. Linda stood on the terrace watching as Ethan excitedly bounded across the manicured lawn, tossing a soccer ball in the air. Charles Caldwell trailed behind, wearing casual athletic clothes and looking like he was still learning to relax into this new fatherly role. From her vantage point, Linda couldn't help marveling at the sight. Ethan, brimming with eagerness, animatedly pointing out where they could set up mini-goals. Charles nodding attentively, though he often glanced over at Linda as if to say, "Can you believe this is really happening?" In truth, Linda felt that same sense of unreality. Just a week ago, life had seemed so different. Her routine of long work shifts, solitary parenting, and the lingering question of Ethan's father. Now, with the paternity confirmed and preliminary legal documents in the works, they'd formed a precarious alliance. She still lived in her small apartment, but she and Ethan spent more and more time at the Caldwell estate. There, Ethan had space to run around, and Linda felt a measure of relief knowing her son was forging a bond with his dad. "Mom!" Ethan hollered, waving her over. "We need a goalie!" She chuckled, sliding off her sandals to cross the cool grass. "I'm not a great goalie, bud," she teased. "I might just stand there and watch you score." Ethan grinned. "It's okay. Dad says we can take turns." Dad. That word still made Linda's stomach lurch, but it simultaneously filled her with a fragile kind of hope. She moved to the spot Ethan indicated, a pair of small orange cones serving as a makeshift goal. Charles stood across from her, rolling the ball under his foot. "Ready?" he called. Linda drew in a breath, bent her knees, and shot Ethan a playful wink. "Bring it on." The mini-game that ensued was hilariously uncoordinated and full of laughter. Ethan dashed between them, frequently interrupting play to announce new rules, like awarding extra points for fancy footwork. Charles attempted to demonstrate a move he'd learned in college, only to nearly trip over the ball. Linda, in a rare moment of playful abandon, attempted a slide tackle on Ethan. He squealed with delight, easily dodging her and tapping the ball into the goal. Even Barbara, the ever-composed house manager, paused at the terrace doors, smiling softly as she watched. The sun warmed their skin, and for an hour or so, Linda forgot about the mountains of paperwork awaiting them, or the tabloids that had begun circulating whispers about Charles Caldwell's secret child. "Goal!" Ethan crowed, arms in the air. He panted from exertion, cheeks red, eyes shining. "We're up by 4. Charles wiped sweat from his brow, grinning at Linda. "You want to switch sides? My team's at a disadvantage here." Before she could reply, however, they heard the chirp of Charles's phone. He grimaced, glancing at the screen. "I'm sorry. I need to take this. It's the office." Ethan's shoulders slumped with mild disappointment. "But the game?" Charles squeezed Ethan's shoulder. "Just a minute, buddy. I promise I'll be right back." Reluctantly, Ethan nodded, watching as his father strode toward the terrace to answer the call. Linda followed Charles's figure with her gaze, a flicker of concern tugging at her. The world of Caldwell Industries never slept, and sooner or later, it would collide with their fragile family dynamic. As Ethan dribbled the ball around, Linda moved closer to the terrace, just within earshot of Charles. He paced with the phone pressed to his ear, tone low and controlled. She caught bits of the conversation. "Just issue a clear statement. I've already told you we're not dragging Linda or the child into a press conference. Yes, that's final." Her chest tightened. She knew that PR complications came with Charles's status, and while he'd assured her he'd keep them safe from the media spotlight, the tension in his voice told her it wasn't going to be easy. The mention of child and press conference reminded her how precarious their situation remained. With a sigh, Linda turned back to Ethan, who was flopped on the grass, catching his breath. She jogged over and sank to her knees beside him. "You okay, champ?" He nodded, smiling. "That was fun. Do you think Dad can come watch me at school sometime? Maybe the next sports day we have?" Linda's heart squeezed. Ethan was already imagining a future filled with everyday moments he'd previously gone without. A father cheering in the stands, helping at bake sales, or attending school events. "I'm sure he'd love to," she said gently, smoothing his hair. Ethan beamed, then his face grew a bit more serious. "Mom, some kids at school asked me about the story on the internet. They said people are saying I'm the secret heir. What does that mean?" Linda's stomach dropped. She'd hoped it would take longer for the gossip to filter down to a second grader's ears. "It just means some grown-ups are making a big deal about your dad being rich," she explained as calmly as she could. "They're calling you secret heir because you weren't in the public eye before. But it doesn't change who you are, honey." He fiddled with the grass. "I don't want them to treat me weird." Linda's chest burned with protectiveness. "You're still Ethan Thompson. You like soccer, drawing, and joking with your friends. That's not going to change no matter what people say online." Ethan nodded slowly, but she saw lingering worry in his eyes. She leaned in, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Trust me," she whispered. "Dad and I will handle it." Charles cleared his throat behind them. He'd finished the call and now approached with an apologetic grimace. "I'm sorry, work drama. Everything okay here?" Ethan perked up, determined to show enthusiasm. "Yeah, just telling Mom how we won." Charles caught Linda's gaze, sensing her unease. "Ethan, why don't you go grab some water from Barbara?" He handed the boy a plastic water bottle he'd left on the terrace table. "She might have snacks ready too." Ethan bounded off, ball tucked under his arm, leaving Linda and Charles in a small bubble of tension. Linda folded her arms, scanning his face. "Is everything all right?" Charles let out a heavy breath. "The board wants to issue a more definitive statement about—" "Yes. They claim the speculation is hurting investor confidence. The tabloids are swirling with rumors about you and Ethan, and they want me to clarify my status as a father." Linda closed her eyes, a headache forming behind her temples. "I was afraid of this. What does clarify entail?" He looked pained. "They want me to publicly confirm Ethan is my child, that I intend to provide for him, and that there's no feud or scandal. They also want to see some family unity, like photographs or a press event." She stiffened at the very idea. "I'm not parading Ethan in front of cameras. He's just a kid." Charles raised his hands in a soothing gesture. I know. I don't want that either. I already refused a press conference, but we might have to do something low-key, like an official statement on the company website plus a discreet family photo. If we don't address it, the tabloids will keep inventing stories." Her mind reeled. It was so far from anything she wanted for Ethan. Yet she also understood that ignoring the media's curiosity might worsen the rumors and even endanger her privacy further. "I just don't want him hounded at school," she whispered, voice unsteady. "He's hearing about being a secret heir. He's already anxious. Charles gently set a hand on her shoulder. I hate this, he admitted, voice thick with regret. I'd rather everything stay private. But my position, I can't fully shield him unless we do something to calm the speculation. Linda's anger rose briefly. Anger at the machine of wealth and publicity that forced such decisions. But looking at Charles's tired expression, she recognized he was trapped by his own success. Fine, she sighed after a moment, but it has to be on our terms. A short statement, a simple photo. No interviews, no big announcements. Charles nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. Agreed. We'll control the narrative. Keep Ethan's face mostly out of it if possible, just enough to confirm I have a son and that we're all doing fine. She managed a shaky nod. All right, let's do that then. A beat of silence passed. Charles searched her gaze. You okay? Linda sucked in a breath. Yes, or I will be. She hesitated, then touched his arm. Thank you for considering our feelings. I know your company has certain demands. He slid his hand from her shoulder down to clasp hers gently. I promised you I'd never force you or Ethan into an uncomfortable spotlight. Her defenses eased slightly. Let's talk about the timing with your board. Maybe next week after we sign those custody papers. By then we'll have a clearer sense of our arrangement. Next week, Charles confirmed. I'll set it up with my PR team. She gave him a tight smile, then turned to watch Ethan, who was chatting animatedly with Barbara on the terrace. He laughed at something she said, and Linda felt a surge of affection for her son, grateful he could find small joys amidst chaos. Charles followed her gaze, a faint smile on his lips. You raised an incredible kid, Linda. The compliment caught her off guard. Warmth flooded her cheeks. I did my best, but he deserves a dad too. I'm glad he's getting the chance. Charles nodded, his eyes lingering on Ethan. Me too. They stood side by side, letting the late morning breeze pass over them. Linda knew a tidal wave of challenges still loomed. Media intrigue, adjusting to a shared custody plan, bridging their vastly different worlds. But for now, in the hush of the estate's manicured garden, she let herself enjoy a rare moment of camaraderie with Charles Caldwell. Maybe they really could build something stable for Ethan, something that offered love, security, and, dare she hope, at least a fragile sense of belonging. Over the next few days, Linda found her life transformed into a balancing act between the mundane tasks of motherhood, packing lunches, washing dishes after late work shifts, and the high-stakes world that revolved around Charles Caldwell. Their plan was straightforward but unnerving. Finalize custody papers, craft a simple statement for the press, and keep Ethan shielded from public attention as much as possible. It was a bright Wednesday morning when Linda and Ethan made their way to a quiet downtown law office where Charles's attorney John Landon had prepared the final draft of their custody and support agreement. Linda had managed to secure a short consultation with an independent lawyer, an old friend of a friend, just to ensure everything was in Ethan's best interest. As she and Ethan walked down the hallway of a modest brick building with polished wood floors, Linda felt knots of tension clench her stomach. "Mom," Ethan whispered, squeezing her hand, "is this place where we sign the papers that say Dad is really my dad?" She gave him a reassuring smile, though her nerves churned. "Sort of, honey. We already confirmed he's your dad with the test. These documents just make sure it's all official and that you're taken care of." Ethan processed her words quietly, fidgeting with the hem of his t-shirt. Linda could tell he was both excited and anxious, like her. When they reached Landon's door, Charles was already there, dressed in a crisp suit but wearing a warm smile for Ethan. "Hey, buddy," he greeted, stooping a bit to offer a half hug. "Thanks for coming down here with your mom." Ethan hugged him back shyly, drawing an odd, tender look from Linda's independent lawyer, a middle-aged woman named Tricia Miles. She seemed pleasantly surprised by the cordial atmosphere. "Shall we head in?" Landon said, motioning toward a table in the small conference room. "We can take as long as you need to review everything." The meeting began with a thorough run-through of each clause. Ethan sat with a comic book at the table's edge, occasionally peeking up when someone mentioned his name. Landon read key points aloud, Tricia verified them, and Linda tried to keep track without letting her eyes glaze over. Charles frequently asked Linda if she was comfortable, if the terms suited her. Each time she was struck by how careful he was being, making sure she never felt cornered. Finally, they reached the section about custody. It established that Linda retained primary physical custody. Ethan would continue living at her apartment and attending his current school. Charles, recognized as Ethan's legal father, would have joint legal custody and agreed visitation rights. They'd start with weekends and some afternoons, depending on Ethan's schedule. Over time, if Ethan wanted additional stays or if Linda ever needed extra help, they could adjust. Linda's chest tightened when Landon mentioned the clause for potential relocation. He explained it simply. If Linda ever wanted to move out of state or if Charles wished to, they'd need to revisit the plan in court, making sure Ethan's best interests were upheld. She exhaled, relieved that the language wasn't as restrictive as she'd feared. Next was the financial piece, child support well above the standard guideline, health insurance coverage, and a trust for Ethan's future education. Charles also included a small emergency fund for Linda's benefit. Though she'd insisted that she didn't want personal handouts, he'd phrased it as an immediate resource to ensure Ethan's well-being. She felt torn between gratitude and pride, but Tricia gently nudged her to accept the measure, reminding her that it was truly for Ethan in the long run. Eventually, Landon set down the final pen. "We'll do a quick review for clarity," he said. "Then we can sign." Ethan glanced up from his comic. "Is it almost done? Can we go get lunch?" Linda smiled softly, brushing a hand over his hair. "Almost, sweetheart." Tricia flicked through pages one last time, then looked at Linda. "Everything checks out. If you're comfortable, you can sign today and we'll file it with the court. It might take a few days to become official, but effectively, it's settled." Linda steadied herself. This was the moment. Sealing a legal agreement that recognized Charles Caldwell as Ethan's father, a man who, mere weeks ago, she believed she'd never see again. Her throat felt tight with emotion. She exchanged a look with Charles, who offered a small, encouraging nod. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's sign." After the swirl of signatures witnessed by the attorneys, Linda felt a strange lightness and gravity all at once. Charles gave Ethan a playful nudge, whispering, "Congrats, buddy. We're officially a family in the eyes of the law now." Ethan grinned, cheeks flushing with excitement. "Does that mean you can come to my next parent-teacher conference?" Charles laughed. "I wouldn't miss it." Despite the friendly air, Linda couldn't ignore the undercurrent of complexity that lurked in this new arrangement. She slipped the signed copies into a plain manila envelope, glancing at her lawyer. Tricia offered her a thumbs up. Subtle, but reassuring. They stepped out of the conference room into the building's corridor. Tricia shook Linda's hand. "If any issues arise, call me," she said, voice kind. "But it looks like you're in good hands." Linda nodded, grateful for the support, however brief and last minute it had been. Tricia then departed, leaving Linda, Charles, and Ethan to gather themselves. "So," Ethan chirped, bouncing on his toes, "can we celebrate with pizza or something?" Charles made a grand gesture, smiling. "Your wish is my command. Pizza? Burgers? You name it." Ethan cheered, grabbing Linda's hand. She laughed, rolling her eyes in affection. "Pizza it is then," she agreed. As they exited the law office, Linda felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Maybe the path ahead wouldn't be smooth, but at least they had a blueprint. She shot a glance at Charles. His expression was a mix of relief and warmth, tempered by the knowledge that his life had just changed in an enormous way. Outside, the midday sun glinted on parked cars along the street. Charles fished out his phone, presumably to let Mark know they'd decided on a quick lunch. But as he scrolled, his face clouded over with worry. "What's wrong?" Linda asked, instinctively tensing. He hesitated, then showed her the phone screen. A news alert bore a headline. "Rumors swirl over Caldwell's secret son. Company stock takes a dip amid ongoing speculation." Linda's stomach dropped. She'd known the media rumors were stirring, but seeing it so bluntly, along with financial consequences, made it real. She glanced at Ethan, who was humming a tune to himself, oblivious. Charles sighed, lowering his voice. "We need to finalize that press statement soon. My board is pressuring me to make an official acknowledgement and quell the gossip. They're worried this could escalate if we don't control the narrative." Linda inhaled, forcing calm. "Right. Let's do it then. Sooner rather than later." "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "I don't want to rush you or push Ethan into anything he's not ready for." She looked at her son, who was now inspecting a crack in the sidewalk with childlike fascination, then back at Charles. "If we handle it on our terms, it might protect Ethan in the long run. A short statement, a basic family photo, like we discussed. It might be the best way to shut down rumors." Charles nodded slowly. "I'll arrange a meeting with the PR team, let's say tomorrow morning. That way we can plan exactly what we'll say and how. No paparazzi, just an official release." Her nerves fluttered. "Tomorrow morning," she repeated, letting the reality sink in. They'd be stepping into the public eye, at least briefly, to announce Ethan's existence. "All right." Looking relieved, Charles pocketed his phone and mustered a smile. "Now, about that pizza." He turned to Ethan, who beamed back. "You ready?" "Yes." Ethan practically hopped in place, brimming with energy. "Extra pepperoni?" "You've got it, champ," Charles replied, ruffling Ethan's hair. Linda felt a tiny smile tugging at her lips. The swirling chaos, the legal documents, the media pressure, faded for a moment as she watched father and son banter about pizza toppings. She took a breath, letting that small scene of normalcy anchor her. After all, this was what she wanted for Ethan, a father who cared about the little stuff, too. They ended up at a cozy pizzeria not far from the law office, tucked into a corner booth. The walls were decorated with old sports memorabilia, which Ethan found fascinating. An old-fashioned jukebox stood near the entrance playing soft rock tunes. While Ethan devoured slices of pepperoni, Linda picked at her own slice, appetite stifled by nerves about the impending public statement. Charles noticed her unease and reached across the table, placing a hand over hers in a moment of gentle concern. "I know it's scary," he said quietly, out of Ethan's earshot, "but we'll keep it simple. A single photo, a short press release. Then we go back to normal. Well, as normal as it can be." She nodded, trying not to dwell on worst-case scenarios, reporters showing up at Ethan's school, gossip columns dissecting her past. "I trust you," she murmured. "Just let's make sure it's on our terms." He squeezed her hand lightly before withdrawing it. "Absolutely." Ethan finished his slice, wiped his mouth, and piped up, "Dad, do you think we can practice soccer again tonight? Or maybe tomorrow?" Charles grinned. "If your mom's okay with it, sure. We might be a little busy tomorrow morning, but maybe after that." Ethan's brow crinkled, curiosity sparked. "Why are you busy tomorrow morning?" Linda and Charles exchanged glances. He responded carefully. "We have a meeting with some people who help share news about the company I run. We want to let everyone know that you're important to me. That's all." Ethan didn't look entirely satisfied. "Will they tell people at my school?" Linda's heart twisted. "They're not supposed to. But some grown-ups might read about you in magazines or on the internet, and maybe they'll talk. If that happens, you tell me or your dad if anything makes you uncomfortable, okay?" Ethan nodded slowly, the weight of adult matters resting on his small shoulders. "I just want to play soccer," he muttered, folding his napkin. Charles offered a sympathetic smile. "And you will, buddy. promise." Linda reached over to stroke Ethan's hair, feeling that stabbing protectiveness again. She knew life wouldn't always cater to his simple wish of being left alone to be a kid. But at least they had a plan. No tabloids, no massive press conference. A minimal approach to quell rumors, then back to building their new family dynamic. By the time they finished lunch and stepped back out into the midday sun, Linda felt a cautious sense of resolve. The custody papers were signed, Ethan's father officially recognized. The next hurdle loomed, going public, but just enough to stop the media frenzy. She grabbed Ethan's hand, and Charles placed a supportive arm around Linda's back, guiding them toward the waiting car. Despite the swirl of fear, Linda allowed herself a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. If they approached each challenge with honesty and kept Ethan's well-being front and center, they could navigate whatever came next. And after all was said and done, there might be room for something more, an actual family, bound not just by legal documents but by love and trust that could flourish in the face of life's complexities. Early the next morning, Linda and Ethan arrived at Caldwell's estate with the weight of a new day pressing on them. In the foyer, Barbara greeted them warmly, though Linda could detect a faint undercurrent of nerves in the entire household. Today was the day they'd meet with Caldwell's PR team to release a short statement about Ethan. It wasn't an event Linda ever imagined she'd be part of, but here she was, determined to protect her son no matter what. She led Ethan down the hall toward the drawing room, where Charles had set up a private meeting space. Pale morning light filtered through tall windows, illuminating the plush sofas and antique cabinets. Ethan clutched a small backpack, as if bracing for a long day. Charles stood by a polished wooden table, flipping through a slim folder. Two other people, a man in a sharp suit and a woman in a stylish blouse, looked over his shoulder. Linda assumed they were the PR experts. Her pulse quickened at their formal expressions. "Good morning," Charles said, voice hushed. He gave Ethan a quick hug. "This is Martin and Elena. They're here to help us finalize our statement." Both PR agents smiled politely. Elena bent down slightly, offering a gentle nod to Ethan. "Hi there, Ethan. I'm glad to meet you." "Hi," he answered softly, studying them as though unsure why they were so interested in him. Linda guided him to a sofa, and they sat. Charles stood near the table, explaining in quiet tones, "We've prepared a brief press release saying I've recently discovered I have a son, that we're united as a family, and we request privacy. That's it. No sensational details. No forced interviews." Martin, the man in the suit, spoke calmly. "We want to quell rumors by confirming the basic facts and showing a simple family photo. We believe this will reduce speculative media coverage." Linda's insides twisted. Even that single photo felt like a massive step, but she reminded herself that controlling the story now might spare Ethan from a feeding frenzy later. "So, how exactly will this photo be done?" she asked. Elena offered a reassuring smile. "We can take one here in the home, somewhere relaxed. We'll keep Ethan's face as prominent or discreet as you wish. Our goal is just to show that the three of you are comfortable and together." Linda glanced at Charles, who gave her a look brimming with understanding. "We thought maybe the garden?" he suggested. "Or the sunroom. Just a quick snapshot, no big production." Ethan eyed them, fiddling with the zipper of his backpack. "Will people from my school see it?" he asked. Martin cleared his throat gently. "They might, but hopefully once they see we've addressed it, they'll move on to other news. It won't be secret anymore." Ethan puffed out a small breath. "I guess that's okay," he said, shoulders slumping a bit. "I just don't want them teasing me." Linda squeezed his hand. "If anyone teases you, you let me or your dad know, all right?" Ethan nodded, clinging to her reassurance. "All right," Elena said. "Shall we step outside for the photo? The light is good right now." She lifted a small digital camera. "We'll keep it quick." Linda's heart pounded as they followed Elena to the garden. The morning sun glowed over carefully trimmed hedges, dew still on the grass. Barbara had kindly set up a small, tasteful seating area near the rose bushes. Linda swallowed her anxiety as Charles guided Ethan between them. The child's gaze darted nervously, but Linda stroked his back. "Just relax," she whispered. "Stand close," Elena instructed. "Maybe put a hand on Ethan's shoulder." Charles hesitated, then gently draped an arm around Ethan. Linda mirrored the gesture from the other side, her fingers brushing Ethan's small shoulder. Elena snapped a few pictures. Click, click, click. "Could we get one with you smiling, Ethan?" she asked gently. Ethan managed a small grin, uncertain but brave. Linda attempted to keep her own expression calm. Charles exhaled, and for a split second, Linda saw a flicker of genuine warmth in his eyes. They were a patchwork family, thrown together by surprise and necessity. But in that moment, they tried to radiate unity. "Got it," Elena said, lowering the camera. "That should be perfect. Simple, authentic, no fuss." They returned inside, and Martin showed them the draft press release on a tablet. Charles Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Industries, is pleased to announce the recent confirmation of paternity regarding his 7-year-old son, Ethan. Mr. Caldwell and Ethan's mother, Linda Thompson, respectfully request privacy as they transition into family life together. Caldwell Industries affirms its unwavering commitment to community, innovation, and philanthropic endeavors, and will continue forward with minimal disruption to company operations. Linda read it twice. It was brief and straightforward. No sensational claims, no personal history she'd prefer to keep private. She felt some tension fade, though a part of her still braced for public scrutiny. Elena looked at her kindly. "Does this feel okay to you, Linda?" She drew a breath. "Yes," she replied, voice tight with nerves. "Let's do it." Within minutes, Martin emailed the statement to a curated list of media contacts. Elena attached the single photo, just Linda, Charles, and Ethan in the garden, smiling politely. When Linda saw the image flash on Elena's laptop, she felt butterflies. It was real now. "All set," Elena announced. "The press release is live. We'll monitor responses, but hopefully it should quell most questions." Charles looked at Linda and Ethan. "We did it," he said softly. His relief was palpable. Ethan glanced around. "So, that's it?" he asked, puzzled. Linda ruffled his hair, fighting a smile. "That's it, honey. Now we wait and hope people leave us alone." Ethan looked skeptical but nodded, sinking into a nearby armchair. Charles walked the PR agents to the door, where they exchanged quiet goodbyes. Once they were gone, silence settled over the drawing room. Linda let out a long exhale, shoulders sagging. A few minutes later, Barbara reappeared with a tray of sandwiches and lemonade, offering them a quiet escape from the tension. "You've had a busy morning," she said gently. "We sure have," Linda murmured, sipping lemonade. She perched on a sofa while Ethan munched a sandwich, apparently unburdened now that the dreaded photo op was done. Charles scrolled through his phone, occasionally sighing as he read incoming messages or headlines. "It's starting to circulate," he said, keeping his voice even. "Mostly neutral coverage so far, just repeating the statement. Some tabloids speculating about your background, Linda, but nothing too inflammatory. We'll nip that in the bud." She swallowed, remembering that tabloids often thrived on digging up past struggles. "And how do we nip it in the bud?" He looked up, resolute. "I have a good legal team. Anyone who publishes slander or invades your privacy unethically will push back. If reporters try to show up at your apartment, we'll hire security if necessary." The idea of bodyguards made Linda's skin prickle, but she also recognized the seriousness of the threat. She offered a tentative nod. "Okay." Ethan finished his sandwich and turned to Charles. "So, Dad, does this mean you're free now? Can we play soccer?" Charles chuckled. I should check if any crisis erupted from the statement first, but I think so. Give me 10 minutes. Linda smiled at Ethan. I'll come watch, honey, but be patient. Your dad's juggling a lot. Ethan shrugged cheerfully. Sure, Mom. As Charles stepped away, phone already ringing, Ethan wandered to the window overlooking the garden. Linda joined him, soaking in the quiet. Beyond the glass, a soft breeze swayed the rose bushes. She remembered how different life was only a few short weeks ago, anonymously working shifts, caring for Ethan alone, burying the father's memory out of fear and resentment. Now they had attorneys, PR statements, and fleeting paparazzi interest. Yet, ironically, Linda felt less burdened by isolation. She was no longer carrying everything alone. She and Charles were slowly forging a co-parenting bond, a cautious, sometimes awkward alliance, but an alliance nonetheless. Mom? Ethan's voice brought her back. Is it gonna be like this forever? People watching us? She bent down, meeting his gaze. I hope not forever. Probably just until a new story comes along and they move on. He sighed, nibbling his lip. I liked it better when it was just us, but I guess it's okay, 'cause now I have Dad. The sincerity of his statement made Linda's throat tighten. I know it's a lot, she whispered, hugging him. We'll get through it. By afternoon, Charles had finished checking in with his board and PR staff. No major flare-ups yet, just the usual trickle of online gossip. Sensing everyone needed a breath of normalcy, Linda suggested they take a casual drive to the nearby lake, maybe rent a pedal boat. Ethan loved the idea, and Charles agreed, quickly setting aside his tie for a more comfortable polo shirt. They left Mark behind this time, opting to travel in Linda's older sedan, a small act of normalcy Charles seemed to relish. He drove, Linda in the passenger seat, Ethan happily perched in the back seat with the windows partly down. They cruised along country roads until they reached a serene lakeside park, where tall pines cast shade over a pebbled beach. As the three strolled toward the water, Linda observed a subtle shift in Charles's demeanor. Away from the estate and corporate atmosphere, he appeared more at ease, hands in pockets, glancing around at families picnicking and kids splashing near the shore. Ethan raced ahead to the small dock, excited by a flock of ducks floating nearby. They rented a bright blue pedal boat, life jackets included, and ventured onto the water. Ethan leaned over, giggling as he tried to coax a duck closer. Linda and Charles pedaled in a slow, meandering circle, letting the gentle waves rock them. The scene felt almost surreal. No lawyers, no cameras, no obligations, just a boy and his parents sharing a sunny afternoon on the lake. I can't believe I've never done this, Charles mused, looking around. When I was Ethan's age, my father always insisted on yacht outings, never something as simple as a pedal boat on a public lake. Linda smiled softly, imagining a lonely childhood overshadowed by wealth. Ethan's world was the opposite. Small apartments, public parks, borrowing library books for fun. This might be the first boat ride he's ever had, even if it's just a pedal boat. Charles gazed at her, a flicker of something tender in his expression. I guess we're both learning new things. They lapsed into companionable silence, lulled by the sun and water. Linda closed her eyes briefly, letting the gentle breeze calm her nerves about the press release. She realized with a pang that the path they were on was easier to walk when it was just the three of them, away from society's scrutiny. Mom, Dad, look, Ethan exclaimed, pointing at a turtle sunning itself on a rock near the shore. They both leaned over to see, exclaiming with genuine delight. In that moment, Linda felt an almost overwhelming sense of gratitude, that despite all the chaos, they could share these small wonders as a family. They stayed on the lake until late afternoon, eventually returning to shore with tired legs and sun-warmed cheeks. As they walked back to the car, Ethan chatted about how the ducks were so cool, and how he wanted to come back and bring breadcrumbs next time. Linda made a mental note to explain that bread isn't great for ducks, but she was too content to break his excitement just yet. Let's do it again soon, Charles told him, tossing the keys from one hand to the other. "And maybe next time we'll try fishing." Ethan grinned. "Really? You know how to fish?" Charles shot a conspiratorial glance at Linda. "I can learn?" The ride home was equally peaceful. The sunlight danced through the car windows as the day shifted toward evening. At a red light, Linda's phone buzzed with a news notification. Her stomach tensed, but a quick glance showed only a short headline referencing Caldwell's announcement. She clicked it, scanning the text. It was almost identical to the press release. Factual, minimal drama. She exhaled relief. "Everything okay?" Charles asked softly, noticing her reaction. She nodded. "Seems the press release did its job. Headlines are already moving on to other stories." He smiled. "Good." Soon they reached Linda's apartment building, pulling up to the curb. Ethan dozed in the back seat, lulled by the day's excitement. Linda gently roused him, guiding him out of the car. Charles turned off the engine and stepped out as well, walking them to the front entrance. The warm glow of a street lamp illuminated the sidewalk, and for a moment none of them moved to say goodbye. "I can come by tomorrow?" Charles offered, directing his question to both Linda and Ethan. "We can check out that new soccer equipment I had delivered. Thought we'd upgrade those makeshift goals at the estate." Ethan nodded sleepily, smiling. "Sounds fun." Linda felt a pang of longing that surprised her. Their time at the lake had felt so normal, so rare. She wanted more days like that for Ethan, and she had to admit for herself. "We'd like that," she said softly. Charles nodded, stepping forward to hug Ethan. "Sleep well, kiddo." Then he turned to Linda, eyes filled with unspoken gratitude. "You too," he added in a gentle tone. "Call me if you need anything." She nodded, hugging her arms around herself. "Thank you for the day." He squeezed her shoulder briefly, then slipped back into the driver's seat. As the sedan pulled away, Linda and Ethan headed inside. The building's hallway smelled of laundry detergent and someone's cooking. Up in their apartment, Linda clicked on a lamp, casting a warm glow over the cozy living room. Ethan rubbed his eyes. "Mom." "Yeah, bud?" she asked, helping him take off his shoes. "I like having a dad," he murmured, face earnest. "But I'm glad we still have our place. It's nice." Linda's throat tightened with emotion. "We'll always have our place," she promised, voice soft. "And Dad's place, too. We can share both." Ethan nodded, stifling a yawn. Without further words, he dragged himself to his room, leaving Linda alone in the living area. She gazed around, at the worn couch, the chipped coffee table, the photos on the wall. This was the home she'd built for Ethan, a product of long days, short paychecks, and fierce determination. Now she was on the verge of blending her humble life with Charles Caldwell's opulent world. It was daunting, yet she sensed a strange certainty that Ethan would only gain from it. She sank onto the couch, fishing out her phone once more. No new alerts, no urgent calls. For tonight, at least, they had peace. She leaned her head back, letting relief wash over her. The path hadn't been easy, but they'd reached a momentary plateau. The custody agreement signed, the press release out, the public interest largely appeased. In the hush of that evening, Linda allowed herself a rare moment of contentment. Perhaps tomorrow would bring new challenges, questions from neighbors, more corporate demands, or even complicated emotions between her and Charles. But if the day at the lake had taught her anything, it was that their bond with Ethan, and possibly with each other, was worth navigating each obstacle. Glancing at a framed photo of Ethan from his kindergarten graduation, Linda felt a swell of hope. She pictured the future: school milestones with both parents present, soccer matches with a cheering dad, family dinners where each day's triumphs and troubles were shared. A new chapter was unfolding, one she never expected, but now fully embraced. There, in the soft glow of the old lamp, Linda closed her eyes and whispered a silent thank you to fate or chance or whatever cosmic twist had brought Charles Caldwell back into their lives. For the first time in years, She let herself believe that this might be the start of a true family, a tapestry woven from unexpected threads of love, resilience, and forgiveness, all for the sake of a bright little boy who deserved every bit of happiness the world could offer. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.